Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Douglas. Sarah Douglas was born in 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family of 5 siblings. They always get along and help each other. From an early age, her parents commented that she was a girl with a gentle and cheerful personality. However, during her teenage years, her personality changed significantly. She started associating with a group of troubled teens and to spend all her free time with them. As a result, she quickly dropped out of school. At the age of 19, Sarah started dating a boyfriend named Nicholas. In 2007, when she was 20, she became pregnant. By this time, her relationship with Nicholas was deteriorating, and they often fought over minor issues. The arrival of their child only increased the conflict between them, causing them to decide to separate. Nicholas moved to Santa Rosa, a city 150 kilometers away, where he began a new life with another woman. Despite being separated, he still cares for their son, and the two share custody. Sarah found herself in a challenging situation. As a young single mother, with a young child to care for, and education level is not high, she had difficulty making ends meet. Her parents were busy raising their own younger children and couldn't offer her much support. Although her mother and sister helped whenever they could, it still wasn't enough financially. She needed to find a way to earn money. Eventually, Sarah decided to work as an escort, drawn in by the good pay and flexible hours. She has an attractive appearance and quickly became famous in this industry, helping her earn a good income. However, she did not know much about the risks involved in this profession. After a few years as a call girl, she met Orville Fleming, a man who gave her the stability and security she had always craved. She hopes to quit her current job, find a husband, as well as a father for her son, and finally get her life on track. She believes so blindly in her dream that she does not notice the dangers around her. Orville Fleming was born in 1958 in California. Before he met Sarah, he was a happy husband and father. He dedicated over 30 years to his career as a fire chief, earning the respect of his community. He served for 24 years, including 3 years in Modesto. In 1993, he became a fire engineer with the California Department of Forestry. Thanks to his excellent performance, he was promoted to captain and became a battalion chief in 2012. Throughout his career, Orville built an impressive resume and reputation. He also worked part-time as an instructor at a fire academy, where he shared his valuable experience and trained future firefighters. Through hard work, he earned about $130,000 a year, enough to enjoy a wealthy lifestyle. When his children were grown, he and his wife could enjoy a comfortable life and their own pleasures. However, beneath the facade of this seemingly happy family lay a troubling secret about Orville. He spent most of his money on encounters with young escorts, as he found family life dull and craved excitement with attractive young women. He met these women through dating sites and escort services, and that led him to Sarah, a 20-year-old girl, 30 years younger than him. In his intimate relationships with these young girls, he sought the variety that was missing from his long-term marriage. His wife is a discreet woman, so he often turns to call girls to satisfy his private needs. After meeting the beautiful Sarah online, Orville began dating her regularly. She charges $300 an hour for each meeting. He became very fond of her, and their encounters began to occur more frequently. She opened up to him about her struggles, earning Orville's sympathy, which gradually evolved into love. He loved Sarah so much that he decided to divorce his wife to start a new life with her, and she agreed. Orville decided to take action immediately. He soon had a conversation with his wife, leading him to leave her and their 2 children to be with his mistress, Sarah. he purchased a house in a quiet suburb near Sacramento. Sarah joyfully shared the news with her family, believing that her life would improve and that she could finally create a stable family. She promised Orville that she would quit the escort service and never return to that line of work. Everything seemed to be going well. However, Sarah's family was concerned about the age difference between her and her boyfriend. She was only 24 years old, while her boyfriend Orville was 54 years old enough to be her father. However, he seemed to be a thoughtful family man, which helped ease their worries. They saw this as a happy time in Sarah's life and supported her, not wanting to affect her happiness. At the start of their life together, everything seemed perfect and joyful. Orville tries to arrange the house so that Sarah and her son feel as comfortable as possible. She gave up her job as a call girl and started a normal life, becoming a housewife. Their life felt like a fairy tale, a perfect home, and a loving relationship. Sarah wishes to have a closer relationship, and she also wants to marry Orville. Her dreams seemed to come true when Orville presented her with an expensive engagement ring, adorned with a large diamond. She accepted his proposal, but her happiness was short-lived. Orville turned out to be very jealous and controlling. He was possessive and wanted to monitor her every move, making her report on everything she did. He realized that she was financially dependent on him, and he used that to control her life, making her completely attached to him. The relationship lasted several years until Sarah grew impatient. Orville exhibits obsessive behavior and wants to control the people she interacts with, even in public. This led to suspicions and arguments between them. Additionally, conflicts arose with Orville's wife, Megan, who was still legally married to him. He filed for divorce, but the process took a long time, giving her more time to pressure him over financial matters. By early 2014, the situation had become very tense. Megan frequently calls Orville to ask him to pay off his debt and give her more money. She was particularly upset about the large sums he spent on call girl service, which often left Sarah in tears. At this point, Sarah and Orville's relationship had significantly deteriorated. She began spending more time with her mother and sister, and during one conversation, she admitted that she wanted to end the relationship due to the mounting problems. Sarah realized that continuing the relationship was a mistake. However, she did not think that her decision to leave him could lead to serious consequences. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah's day started like any other. She sent her son to visit his biological father for a few days and planned a vacation with her mother and sister. They first went to a casino where they enjoyed themselves until 11 p.m. During that time, Orville kept calling and texting her, but she chose not to respond. He was upset that she ignored his request not to have fun while he was away. As midnight approached, Stephanie, Sarah's sister, took her back to the house she shared with Orville, and they said their goodbyes. Once inside the house, Sarah immediately noticed a strong smell of gas. She went to the kitchen and saw that the gas burners left on. Alarmed, she called her sister Stephanie to let her know that Orville had neglected to turn off the gas. It was obvious he wanted to poison her. Suddenly, a scream was heard, startling she. Orville had unexpectedly shown up, disrupt her and Stephanie's phone call. Then, all Stephanie could hear was her terrified screams. Assuming it was just another argument between lovers, Stephanie decided to hang up and go to bed. Early in the morning, Stephanie decided to call Sarah to find out what had happened the previous night. She dialed Sarah's number, but was surprised when there was no answer, as Sarah usually stayed in touch. As anxiety grew over Sarah's lack of response, she and her aunt went to Sarah's house around 8 a.m. to check. They rang the doorbell and knocked for a long time, but no one answered. Just as they were about to leave, her aunt tried the door handle, and to their surprise, the door opened. This was unusual behavior, which made them even more worried. but they decided to go inside. Once inside, they found the living room in disarray, with furniture out of place and items scattered everywhere. They cautiously made their way to the bedroom, hoping to find Sarah. At that moment, a neighbor heard them screaming from the window. He saw them running out of Sarah's house, clearly terrified. When he asked what was wrong, they told him there was a human body inside the house. The neighbor immediately called 911 to report the situation. By 9 a.m., officers were on the scene. Several officers worked together to calm and interview the witness. In the bedroom, the officers discovered clear evidence of a struggle. A young woman lay face down on the floor, showing no signs of life. She had injuries on her body and neck, including cuts and a sheet tied around her throat. Blood was splattered on the bed and walls. In the bathroom, they found a bloody towel thrown into the washing machine. All the windows were tightly closed. They quickly secured the crime scene and started their investigation. Forensic experts arrived to gather evidence, and the body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The witnesses identified Sarah Douglas, who was 26 years old when she died. The autopsy revealed that she suffered at least 14 stab and cut wounds, likely inflicted with a kitchen knife. There were also signs of suffocation on her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. Forensic experts discovered multiple bruises and evidence of beatings on her body, indicating she had fought back fiercely. Blood tests showed that at the time of her death, she was neither drunk nor under the influence of drugs. Sarah's aunt and sister informed detectives that she had previously worked as a call girl, but quit after meeting Orville. Despite their age difference, she believed he was a good man who could help her build a better life. However, their relationship had become strained in recent months, and she had decided to end things with him. Additionally, Sarah's sister Stephanie informed detectives about everything she heard on her cell phone the night before. It was likely that Orville attacked Sarah and killed her out of jealousy. As a result, he became the primary suspect in the brutal murder, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Despite their best efforts to search for him, they still couldn't find him. He was not at home, at work, with his ex-wife Megan, or with his relatives. He had gone into hiding, prompting the police to place him on a statewide wanted list. Just a day after the search began, Orville's official car was found abandoned near a house, but there was no sign of him being there, nor any clues as to where he might have gone. Police have gathered detailed information about Orville and issued a wanted poster stating that he is a particularly dangerous criminal. The database indicated that he owned 2 pistols, but they were not found in his car or at the murder scene. It is believed he was carrying them and may resist arrest. Citizens were alerted to stay vigilant and report any suspicious individuals, while also being advised to exercise caution and avoid confrontations with Orville, who may be armed and very dangerous. The search operation lasted over 2 days. During this time, family and friends gathered near Sarah's home, closely following the search and hoping for any news. They came to honor her memory as a victim of domestic violence. The media also took a keen interest in the case, tracking the police investigation closely. Orville's colleagues were equally shocked by the incident. They knew him as a kind, positive person and a professional with a stellar reputation who had consistently demonstrated his integrity on the job. However, it is worrying that he disappears soon after the death of his young lover Sarah, raising suspicions about his involvement. 5 days later, Orville was fired from his position as head of the fire department because he failed to report to work without any explanation. Given the circumstances, this was merely a bureaucratic formality. Meanwhile, the search is being extended to areas where he may be hiding. He is experienced in outdoor activities and regularly participates in challenging hikes. His endurance and survival skills are evident in extreme conditions. He is known for training in remote wilderness areas for for long periods of time that few people know about. Even though there is a lot of information surrounding the case, the situation seems to be becoming more tense. Orville's wife, Megan, decided to make the situation more serious. She claimed that he and other members of the California Fire Brigade often invited escorts to the fire station for entertainment. Megan said she had seen videos showing these women arriving at the fire station and having fun inside the fire trucks. She also mentioned that a woman named Sarah had been present on a couple of occasions. The police received information regarding the situation and visited the fire station to speak with the employees and verify the details. However, they were unable to locate any video recordings or photographs that Megan had mentioned. Megan could not provide this evidence either, leaving the rumors unconfirmed. In addition, Megan also said that during the time Orville was having an affair with Sarah, he had run up a large debt due to his addiction to prostitutes. She asked him to pay the debt, but he never did. She also mentioned a diamond engagement ring that she suspected was fake. She also convinced the police that Sarah, Orville's mistress, had been stalking her, alleging that Sarah frequently called and threatened her. As a result, she sought a restraining order against Sarah, but this claim could not be substantiated as there was no evidence of harassment. It appeared that she may have fabricated these accusations to further tarnish Sarah's reputation in the eyes of the public. After 2 weeks of thorough investigation, the court denied Megan's request for divorce. On May 26, 2014, Orville was finally captured at a bus stop near where his official car was found. He had been hiding in the forest, but was spotted when he ventured out to buy food, despite having shaved his mustache and attempted to disguise himself. He was taken into custody without issue. He did not have a gun and surrendered to police. After his arrest, he needed special supervision. On May 20, 2014, Orville appeared in court. He claimed he could not afford a lawyer, but maintained his innocence. 10 days after the initial hearing, the city's road patrol began a new investigation into illegal activities involving members of the fire department where Orville worked. By October 2014, after the hearing had officially lasted more than a month, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family was shocked by Orville's arrogance, especially when he winked at the public defender. The prosecution detailed the troubled relationship between Sarah and he. He is portrayed as a jealous man who wants complete control over Sarah's life. He prohibited her from working, took away her personal bank account and mobile phone, and restricted her from using her own vehicle. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway into misconduct at the fire department where Orville worked. On December 29, 2014, the investigation confirmed that there was inappropriate sexual behavior between firefighters after hours. Although the video recordings mentioned by Megan were never located, but the investigation led to 16 firefighters being placed on administrative leave. In June 2015, the Orville trial entered its final stages. The defense presented defendant Orville in a favorable light, arguing that he was a victim influenced by Sarah, a prostitute with drug and alcohol problems. They argued that he was exploited and pointed out that he did not recall the argument with Sarah. This strategy was intended to help reduce the charges against him. As part of this strategy, the defense also sought to discredit Sarah. On the night of the incident, a violent argument erupted, which was overheard by her older sister, Stephanie. However, Orville described experiencing a dissociative state, likening it to being a zombie, as he went to the kitchen to get a knife. He then returned to the bedroom and stabbed Sarah multiple times. Next, he began strangling her until she showed no signs of life. He maintained that he could not remember the details, stating that the incident played out in his mind like disjointed fragments. Orville attempted to sway the jury by expressing deep remorse for his actions. The prosecution aimed to demonstrate that he was not telling the truth. They presented recorded interrogations, where his statements contradicted his testimony during the trial. This discrepancy damaged his credibility and led the court to pursue a first-degree murder charge. On June 24, 2015, just 2 days after the debate ended and just before his birthday, Orville Fleming was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Sarah's death had a devastating impact, not only on her, but also on those around her. A few months later, her brother Leroy, who was very close to her, died, unable to cope with the grief of losing his younger sister. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Rickman. At 2:30 a.m. on Friday, September 13, 2013, Victoria Rickman, 30, called 911 from her home on Cliffland Road in DeKalb County, Georgia. She reported a violent incident involving her fiancé, William Carter. She told the operator that he had tried to rape her again, and despite her pleas for him to stop, he didn't, so she shot him multiple times. When the police arrived, they found Victoria at the door, holding a small dog. Inside the bedroom was a scene of chaos and violence. The lifeless, naked body of a man was on the bed, riddled with bullets, and blood was splattered throughout the room, with bullet holes marking the walls and ceiling. A .40 caliber pistol was found on the nightstand. The victim, 30 years old William Carter, was declared dead at the scene. Victoria, in a state of hysteria, required medical assistance. After examining the scene, the police initially concluded that it was a case of self-defense, as Victoria claimed William had attacked her, forcing her to shoot randomly in defense. She was taken to the police station to provide a statement. However, as the investigation progressed, new details came to light. Victoria Rickman's first marriage ended in a divorce, with both parties accusing each other of abuse. During the marriage, she had a son whom she adored. At the time of the divorce, he was 8 years old. Victoria's friends described her as a devoted mother and a kind person who was always willing to help others. A few years after the divorce, Victoria met William Carter through work colleagues. William was a successful businessman and is a divorced man. At that time, Victoria worked as a marketing consultant. They often encountered each other at work and soon began a passionate romance. They were inseparable, doing everything together and appearing to be the perfect couple. However, over time, the relationship developed issues similar to those Victoria had experienced in her first marriage. After they got engaged and moved in together, Victoria discovered that things were not as perfect as she had hoped. William became possessive, insulted her, and was physically abusive. She repeatedly forgave him and they continued living together. It was a vicious cycle of a toxic relationship that she couldn't escape. Victoria's friends advised her to leave William, they warning that things would end badly if she stayed. Victoria said she endured psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, and she felt she had no ability to change her situation. She continued to endure and forgive his behavior. However, just before the tragedy, she found the strength to leave. Then he began to harass her relentlessly. According to Victoria, that night, he broke into her house and attacked her, escalating their conflicts to a peak. He threatened to rape her, and although she resisted, but she couldn't overpower him due to his physical strength. For the first time, Victoria feared for her life, convinced that the night would end in death. Either hers or his. So, she defended herself by grabbing a gun and shooting him multiple times. Victoria's best friend fully supported her and was sure that she was in grave danger that night, otherwise, she would not have used a weapon. The friend knew there were family issues but did not think it could all end like this. The detectives decided to speak with William's family to hear their version and get a more complete picture of the relationship between Victoria and William. William's parents, who had just learned of what happened to their son, immediately denied that it was self-defense. They gave a completely different story about Victoria. The parents said they had warned their son about the dangers of such a toxic relationship. They disliked Victoria from the start because of her unpleasant personality, and they saw her as a threat to be avoided. A few weeks before the tragedy, another disturbing incident occurred during an argument between William and Victoria. His parents noticed he was bleeding and injured. He explained that Victoria had hit him on the head with a hammer and bit his back. His parents were shocked because the blow was severe and could have been fatal. They dreaded to think what might have happened if she had had a gun. Then William and Victoria separated again, and his parents hope they won't come back. He didn't press charges against she because she threatened to accuse him of rape. William's family said they often argued and these conflicts often progressed into fights. Sometimes Victoria attacked William, and sometimes he attacked her. During their 3 years their relationship was tumultuous. Victoria and William frequently reported each other to the police for issues ranging from domestic disputes to assaults. Police reports confirmed this pattern. She threatened to obtain a restraining order against he, while he threatened to have her jailed for making false accusations. A few days before William died, he and Victoria met, but the meeting did not end well. They argued, and William called 911 to request police assistance to evict Victoria from his home. When the police arrived, Victoria claimed that William had hit her, but they saw that she had no injuries. The police discovered that she had sent text messages to his phone with false accusations, claiming he had kidnapped her and threatened her, whereas he was simply asking her to leave him alone. The police helped she pack her belongings and escorted her out of his house. William told her he never wanted to see her again. Although Victoria promised not to bother him anymore, she did not keep her word. A few days later, Victoria began texting William, asking to meet, but he ignored her. She then devised a new plan and contacted his ex-wife, repeatedly harassing his ex-wife. The ex-wife complained to William about her behavior. This upset he, and he sent she a message. He said she are too dangerous to be around, and told her never to contact him or his ex-wife again. The conflict reignited. During another argument, he threatened to report her to the police because she attacked him with a hammer. Victoria was furious because she realized that this could threaten her custody of her beloved son. William's family believed this was the motive for the crime. The relationship between William and Victoria became increasingly complicated and confusing. Although Victoria alleged that she was raped by William, an autopsy found no signs of violence or internal trauma, shows that sexual intercourse was consensual. On her body, there were only 2 small bruises, one on her arm and one on her leg. These bruises appeared old and not the result of a recent struggle, as they were already fading. Her new manicure was intact without any broken nails and showed no signs of a struggle since there were no skin particles under her nails. Furthermore, William did not have any scratches, which was unusual. When the police arrived at the house, Victoria's appearance raised suspicions. While the room was covered in blood, she appeared clean. With no blood on her pajamas or body, and her hair was wet as if she had just showered. The police doubted Victoria's story and suspected her of killing William. Forensic experts thoroughly investigated the scene of the tragedy and concluded that Victoria's testimony was inaccurate. Evidence indicated that William was shot while standing with his back to Victoria. It was believed he was next to the bed, facing the window, when he was hit 3 times. One of the shots caused blood to fill his lungs, leading to a cough. The high blood spatter on the wall next to the window suggested that he was standing when shot. After coughing, he likely fell onto the bed, and Victoria continued shooting him, she firing several more shots into his chest and head. There were no signs of a struggle in the house, everything was neatly in place. This also contradicts Victoria's testimony that a struggle occurred. Victoria was detained and brought to the police station for questioning. Upon hearing she was accused of murdering William, her expression changed drastically, surprised by the accusation. When the police tried to collect her phone as evidence for examination, she tried to snatch it back furiously. This behavior seemed strange to the investigators. It seemed that she was hiding something on the phone and feared it would be discovered. Investigators examined the correspondence between Victoria and William, as well as their phones, revealing that William deeply loved her. He sent heartfelt messages, calling her the love of his life, but expressed concern about her actions. He feared her false accusations might lead to his imprisonment. Subsequent messages from William show a marked change in tone. The investigation uncovered that Victoria had sent herself a threatening message from William's phone to incriminate him. Further evidence showed that Victoria had attacked William on at least 2 occasions, yet she called the police and claimed he attacked her. Victoria threatened to smear her neighbor Plunkett when he tried to evict her from the flat. Victoria Rickman was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She finally stood trial for the murder of William Carter in August 2017, after spending almost 4 years in jail. Once a vibrant and attractive woman, famous for her beautiful appearance, Victoria appeared completely different and almost unrecognizable in court. Several men testified about how skillfully she had manipulated them during flirtations, causing them to become infatuated with her and willing to do anything for her. Even some police officers admitted they were captivated by Victoria's beauty and flirtatious behavior when she responded to complaints of domestic violence, make them side with her. These officers later regretted their lack of impartiality. A prime example of Victoria's manipulation was her relationship with Deputy Sheriff Kobe County Price. She reported threats from William to him. Upon seeing bruises on her body, he entrusted her with one of his personal pistols for self-defense. This same pistol was used in the shooting of William. Additionally, the deputy sheriff took Victoria to a shooting range and taught her how to use a gun, and she developed her shooting skills expertly. After William was murdered, Victoria first called Cuba Price and then, on his advice, she called 911. During the trial, Cuba Price admitted he was captivated by Victoria despite being married at the time. He thought their relationship might evolve, but denied having an affair, stating they were just friends. By the trial, he no longer worked at the sheriff's office and was instead an instructor at the Air Force Base. He had been fired 5 days after William's death for not cooperating with the investigation, as he protected and defended Victoria. The charges alleged that Victoria used her charm to entice William to her home on that tragic night. Sadly, William could no longer share his side of the story, so the prosecutor presented it on his behalf. According to the prosecutor, Victoria called William that evening, inviting him over with the promise of intimacy, thereby luring him into a trap. Once he arrived, she allegedly took advantage of the situation and killed him in cold blood by shooting him 9 times. The prosecutor argued that shooting him 9 times was excessive. Her decisive actions suggested premeditation, leading the prosecutor to conclude that it was a planned murder. Additional evidence supported this conclusion. At the time of the murder, Victoria was living with another man, Andrew, in his house. That night, she asked Andrew to stay at his mother's house so she could be alone and get a good night's sleep. Trusting her, Andrew agreed and went to his mother's. Just half an hour after he left, Victoria contacted William, and he arrived at her house after midnight. It's unclear what she said to him on the phone, but it's presumed she invited him over. There were no signs of forced entry. Victoria herself opened the door for William. He did not break into her home and was unaware of her address until she gave it to him during the call. During the trial, the doctor who examined Victoria after the murder testified, and photos of Victoria were presented. The doctor stated that he found no injuries on her body, including any defensive wounds or fresh bruises. It appeared she had not been raped, as their relationship was consensual. Notably, a bruise on her hand, which she claimed was from a fight with he, was visible in a selfie taken the day before his murder, proving it was unrelated to self-defense. Photographs from the crime scene were also shown at the trial. William's naked body, with multiple gunshot wounds, was found lying face-up on the bed. His clothes were on the floor next to the bed, his watch was neatly placed on the nightstand, and he held a gold chain in his left hand. It seemed he was disturbed while dressing, and when he tried to refasten his necklace, he was shot. An expert confirmed that William was shot from behind, indicating he posed no threat to Victoria. An autopsy revealed that William was shot 9 times. 4 times in the chest, 3 in the back, and twice in the head. He also had bruises on his chin and left hand, likely caused by a blunt object. Blood spatters were found on the wall, curtains, and pillows on the floor. The medical examiner suggested that William was facing the window when he was first shot in the back, fell onto the bed, and was then shot the remaining times. During the trial, questions were raised about the reloading of the pistol. The pistol can only hold 12 rounds, yet 9 spent cartridges were found at the scene, leaving 4 bullets in the pistol. This totals 13 bullets, leading the prosecution to conclude that Victoria had reloaded the pistol. If she reloaded, the act could not be deemed as self-defense, as reloading shows premeditation. At the trial, a neighbor named Plankett testified that Victoria had previously threatened him when he attempted to evict her from her apartment. She threatened to accuse him of rape, causing him to back down to avoid trouble. Victoria had filed multiple rape complaints against different men, but no criminal cases were initiated because there was no evidence beyond her claims. The prosecution found it suspicious that all the men around her were accused of rape. The lawyer argued that Victoria was a vulnerable and defenseless woman in life. She had suffered violence from both her first husband and William, her fiancé. On the night of the incident, William broke into her house, assaulted, and raped her, then threatened her life. To protect herself, she used a firearm provided by her friend, the deputy sheriff. The lawyer asserted that this was clearly a case of self-defense. The defense stated that William arrived at Victoria's house intoxicated and under medication. A doctor testified that 3 days before his death, William reported experiencing delirium and was prescribed antipsychotics to aid his sleep. The lawyer also suggested he might have used illegal drugs that night, causing his aggression. However, it remains unknown whether he was intoxicated or on drugs that night, as no toxicology test was conducted. Dr. Chris Lees Perry, the former Georgia chief medical examiner, testified for the defense, indicating that Victoria first shot William in the chest, not the back. During the trial, Victoria's 911 call was played, and the lawyer stressed that the emotions she expressed were genuine and couldn't be faked. She sounded truly desperate. Victoria's best friend testified for the defense, stating that she had seen bruises on Victoria before, which Victoria claimed were caused by William. However, the friend never witnessed any violent incidents and couldn't confirm the bruises were from William. She did recall overhearing William yelling at Victoria on the phone once. Seeing Victoria's distress during that call convinced her that Victoria was a victim of domestic violence and not capable of murder. She believed Victoria acted in self-defense. The defense also highlighted William's troubled past. He had struggled with substance abuse and had been arrested several times for property damage. After 10 years of marijuana use, he went to rehab. William's parents confirmed this thing, but they said that he had overcome his addiction, rebuilt his life, and started a business. They were proud of his recovery and believed that Victoria was his last obsession. They felt that whenever she called, he would rush to her without realizing the potential danger. The prosecution presented a dramatic video recorded on Victoria's mobile phone 4 months before William's death. In the video, She threatened to call the police and accused him of rape after he kicked her out. She acted aggressively, trying to enter the house, but he prevented her. She responded that he could not tell her what to do and that she had a gun and knew how to use it. Her behavior did not seem like that of a typical victim of violence. The conversation concluded as William expressing that Victoria was frightening him, saying he did not want to see her anymore, and then leaving. The prosecution believed something similar occurred on the night of the incident, but with a tragic ending. At the trial, the jury heard two different yet plausible stories. They now had to decide which side was more convincing, its self-defense or premeditated murder. The jury reached a verdict in less than an hour, finding Victoria Rickman guilty. She sat silently, devastated by the decision, and cried. She addressed the judge, saying that she believed the jury was wrong. "Thank you for explaining the facts of this case. I am a mother whose son was taken from me." She describes herself as a battered woman who endured years of abuse and suffered nightmares and post-traumatic stress disorder from trying to defend herself. Victoria continued to deny her guilt and showed no remorse for shooting William. As a result, the judge was not lenient and sentenced Victoria to life in prison without parole. Her lawyer was also shocked by the verdict and sentence, considering them unfair. He believed the evidence was circumstantial and unconvincing, and that she deserved the possibility of parole and a more lenient sentence. Victoria is appealing and hopes her case will be reviewed, but so far her requests have been denied. William's daughter is being raised by his mother, and Victoria's son is being raised by her ex-husband. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Gloria Pompali. Gloria Pompali was born in Frosinone, Italy, on December 18, 1993. She had a brother, and after they were born, their parents divorced. From the age of 6 to 16, Gloria was adopted by another family because her mother was very poor and could not afford to raise her. During this time, social workers closely monitored Gloria, believing she had a cognitive disorder with developmental delays. Even as an adult, she remained very naive and was easily manipulated. This naivety was evident in both her behavior and her overall perspective on life. Gloria did not receive a proper education, which later made it hard for her to find a job. As she grew up, she chose to leave the family that had adopted her and live on her own in a specialized institution. At 16, while living there, Gloria fell in love with a young man named Alex, who was about her age and of Romanian origin. They had two sons together, Gabriel and Emanuele. However, soon after, Alex was arrested and imprisoned for selling illegal substances. As a result, Gloria became a single mother, faced difficulties from society and shouldered the responsibility of raising her two young children on her own. Gloria tried her best to be a good mother despite facing difficult circumstances. Without a full-time job, she relied on her mother, Carmela, for support. Carmela's help allowed their small family to find stability with a modest income. Carmela worked as a cleaner at a local hotel, and together, they managed to handle their challenges. Things seemed to get better, especially when the children's father, Alex, was released from prison. However, Alex did not want to rekindle his relationship with Gloria, and instead quickly found a new girlfriend. Despite this, he maintained a good relationship with his children and occasionally helped them financially. At the end of 2015, Gloria went on an errand and unexpectedly met her aunt, Lloyd DePreet, at the post office. After hearing about Gloria's struggles, Lloyd offered her a job as a saleswoman in a flower shop. Gloria was having difficulty finding work at the time, so this unexpected offer excited her. Trusting her aunt and believing she genuinely wanted to help, Gloria discussed the plan with her mother, Carmela. However, Carmela was not pleased with the proposal because she did not trust Lloyd and found the sudden offer suspicious. Despite Carmela's concerns, Lloyd and Gloria were able to persuade Carmela to agree to the plan. Lloyd thoroughly explained the job details, giving the impression that she genuinely wanted to help them during a tough time, while also finding a reliable worker for the shop. Gloria eagerly accepted her aunt's offer, oblivious to any potential risks. Unknown to Gloria, Lloyd was dating an Egyptian man named Saad Mohammed Alesh Salem. Saad was a legal migrant, but his brother Hadi was not. Lloyd devised a plan to help Hadi get a residence permit by arranging for Hadi to marry Gloria. Lloyd believed this would eventually lead to Hadi gaining citizenship. To facilitate this, she and Saad moved closer to the Gloria family. Lloyd offered Gloria a job to involve her more in their plan. Unaware of their real intentions, Gloria was captivated by Hadi when they met. Thinking she had finally found happiness, she agreed to marry him, not realizing the deceit behind their motives. Gloria's marriage to Hadi was arranged not out of love, but so Hadi could gain residency. They celebrated with Lloyd and Saad, but Gloria's happiness didn't last. After a brief celebration, they returned to Lloyd's house, an old building without heating. Gloria and her children had to leave their comfortable home and move into the tiniest room in a new apartment. Her Aunt Lloyd had promised Gloria a better life, including a potential job, but it became clear this was a deception. Lloyd never intended to help Gloria find work, and her delays only added to Gloria's hardship. In the months that followed, Gloria's living situation only worsened. Hadi quickly abandoned her, claiming he had found work in a nearby city. Gloria was left to care for her children alone, trapped in a cold and cramped room. Her aunt's empty promises had turned her life into a nightmare, one that would last for a year and a half. The apartment belonged to Lloyd, and she demanded that Gloria pay the rent. However, Gloria was unemployed and couldn't afford to pay. The family had no money, but Lloyd used another tactic to exert pressure. She criticized Gloria for being a bad mother. She threatened that if Gloria went to the police, her children would be taken away, just like Gloria was removed from her own mother. This threat deeply affected Gloria and left her feeling intimidated, though she hoped for a better outcome. Lloyd and Saad continued to insist Gloria pay for her stay, but she remained unable to settle the debt. They proposed a drastic way for her to earn money to cover her expenses, trading her own body. Gloria refused and begged to be allowed to go home. In response, Saad showed extreme anger and brutality. He regularly beat Gloria, and her children also suffered. On one occasion, he even threw stones at her son, leaving him with serious injuries. Gloria was locked in a room with her children, unable to escape. In order to be able to collect rent from Gloria, Lloyd and Saad pressured she to start servicing men, suggesting the room she shared with her children would be suitable for this purpose. Gloria refused once more. In response, they beat her and issued threats, but that doesn't work either. Too angry, Saad took Gloria's children, placed them in a wicker basket, tied a rope to it, and hung it precariously, threatening their safety. Fearing for her children's lives, Gloria is forced to comply with Saad and Lloyd's demands, and men begin to seek her out. Whenever she tried to refuse serving men, Saad and Lloyd abused her children again, and the beatings continued. The recent violence happened because Gloria had a low income. She had few clients, and her work generated very little money. For a long time, Gloria hoped this situation would end, and she dreamed of getting a job in a flower shop, believing it would improve her circumstances. However, she later discovered that her Aunt Lloyd did not own a flower shop. Lloyd continued to force Gloria into sex work and took every penny she earned. Even this was not enough for Lloyd. Since there weren't many clients, Lloyd made Gloria and the children beg on the streets under her supervision. All the money collected from begging was also taken by Lloyd, but this activity was too noticeable and risky, so they stopped it, and Gloria was forced to serve men again. Lloyd and Saad managed to bring more men for Gloria to serve. To cover up, Lloyd visited Gloria's mother, Carmela, and claimed that the children were fine, the family lived in another city, and Gloria was doing well at her flower shop job. This made Carmela suspicious, because she still talked to her daughter on the phone from time to time. During these calls, Gloria assured her mother that everything was fine. However, Gloria was so beaten down and scared that she lied to protect herself and the children. In their phone conversations, Gloria described her work as a salesperson. However, one thing puzzled Carmela. Gloria mentioned leaving home at 6 a.m. and returning late, which didn't match the typical hours of a flower shop. This seemed strange, but Carmela thought Gloria might be prepping and cleaning the store before and after hours, explaining the long work days. Despite this, Carmela trusted her daughter's words. Gloria never complained to her mother or asked for her help. By this time, Gloria has served men every day, and this unfortunate house is called the Pink House, due to the color the facade is painted. For Gloria's children, the house became a haunting place of fear and suffering. Lloyd took out their anger on Gloria daily, and her children were constantly abused. This went on for months. The eldest child later remembered never feeling safe there, shuddering at every noise. Neighbors suspected what was happening, as they often heard screams and cries and saw bruises and injuries on Gloria and her children. Sometime after the events began, a neighbor contacted social workers. She reported that a family was cruelly treating their young children. Her explanations were vague, but she mentioned that the children were regularly hung in a basket from the balcony. Initially, this sounded strange and unbelievable, so the workers didn't take her claims seriously. Eventually, however, they decided to investigate. When they arrived at the address, they did see a strange basket hanging from the balcony. No one answered the door, so the employees used equipment to remove the basket from the railings. It was empty, so they concluded it was a prank and left. After these incidents, Gloria's situation deteriorated. She was beaten daily. The men, aka Gloria's clients, continued to her, and they also started taking her to a suburban highway where she stood next to a cafe to serve cars that stopped. During this time, Carmela heard from several acquaintances that her daughter, Gloria, was not doing well. Some mentioned Gloria and the bruises on her body. However, with every phone call, Gloria insisted that everything was fine. Lloyd told Carmela what she wanted to hear, that Gloria was happy in her marriage, could finally live a quiet life, and raise children. She said that Gloria was working a lot and therefore couldn't always stay in touch. Carmela believed her again. During this period, Gloria's aunt, Lloyd, increased her control over her. Lloyd was afraid she might cheat and keep some money, so Lloyd would count the condoms and insist that she return the used ones. Gloria complied, but Lloyd always found reasons to accuse her and took all the money whenever she bought food during work. This became another reason for Lloyd to punish and beat her. In 2016, Saad went to Egypt to visit family for 45 days. While he was there, he called Lloyd multiple times, expressing anger that Gloria was resisting. Gloria resisted Lloyd's attempts to force her into serving customers. To ensure obedience, Lloyd placed the children in a basket and dangled them off the balcony, threatening to cut the rope if Gloria did not comply. Neighbors noticed chaos in the apartment Lloyd's. Everyone was aware that Lloyd forced Gloria to beg, and the constant crying of the children in her apartment caused neighbors to start speculating. However, Lloyd created a false narrative, claiming that Gloria was unable to pay rent, while in truth, she was profiting from a criminal operation. Lloyd had a feeling that something was off and was worried that the police might come to investigate. A major obstacle in exposing Saad and Lloyd's criminal scheme is Gloria's behavior. She was too trusting and frequently lied to protect Lloyd, inventing stories that everything was fine. She sometimes claimed she served men because she wanted to and occasionally complained about being forced to curl her hair. When she confessed, her words were not believed. According to Gloria, her husband threatened her with violence against her and her children. She was terrified they would kill her children in front of her. She had already seen Saad throw stones at a boy, which heightened her fear. By 2016, due to fears of exposing criminal actions, Gloria and her 2 children relocated to avoid recognition and continue their activities. They moved into another apartment owned by Lloyd, along with Saad. However, the neighbors grew suspicious and noticed unusual behavior. When they met Gloria on the street, they urged her to move out, but she insisted she had nowhere else to go and struggled to manage alone with 2 children. Some neighbors provided assistance, with one even giving Gloria a free haircut. She slowly formed a friendship with a young man named Stephanie, who found out that Gloria had not completed her education and was in urgent need of employment and money. Even though they are friends, Gloria was too scared to share the abuse she experienced from Lloyd. Later, Stephanie witnessed more distressing incidents. A neighbor confessed seeing, from their apartment window, that Saad frequently visited Gloria and Lloyd. One night, the neighbor witnessed a horrifying incident. A man attacked Gloria, hitting her multiple times and then smashing her window with his head. When a neighbor returned to cut Gloria's hair, they noticed a deep cut on her head. Despite this, Gloria insisted that everything was fine and refused to share any details out of fear. In August 2017, Gloria managed to escape, but her tormentors, Saad and Lloyd, found her the next day. Saad picked her up in a car and brought her back home, where he began yelling at her, insulting her, and hitting her from the doorway. Throughout that month, the neighbor witnessed Gloria being beaten severely every day. Fresh bruises were visible on her face, but when asked about it, Gloria lied, saying it was her own fault or that she had been in accidents. On August 23, Gloria, who was clearly exhausted, was sent out to work again. Security footage later revealed that Saad and Lloyd physically forced her into Lloyd's car. Once inside, Saad struck her 3 hard blows to the face. He initially planned to circle the car and get into the driver's seat, but unexpectedly turned back, opened the door, and hit Gloria several more times. It seemed that she had tried to resist her tormentors again, refusing to comply with them. As a result, they coerced her into submission. Gloria was taken away around 3 p.m. A few minutes later, surveillance cameras at a nearby store captured her buying a chocolate bar. This was the last sighting of her. Witnesses, including the store clerk, reported that she appeared severely beaten, but when asked what had happened, she refused to answer. Despite her injuries, Gloria refused to accept help from others and continued to work on the street until the evening. Around 7:30 p.m., Saad and Lloyd returned in a car, this time accompanied by children, and she was made to sit in the back seat. Again, they took all her earnings for the day. Saad counted the money, ignoring the amount Gloria spent at the store, and scolded her for her low earnings and unexpected expenses. This upset Saad, and he stopped the car in a dark area, pulled Gloria out, twisted her arm behind her back, and delivered several heavy blows to her stomach. These blows later turned out to be fatal. Immediately after the assault, Gloria started choking and lost consciousness, prompting her attackers, Saad and Lloyd, to attempt first aid through artificial respiration. However, their efforts were futile, and Lloyd called for emergency services. Meanwhile, Gloria's children, aged 3 and 5, were in a panic, crying for their mother. Tragically, Gloria was already beyond saving, and officials confirmed her death at the scene. The young mother Gloria was brutally killed in front of her children. Her suffering lasted over 1.5 years before it finally came to an end. Afterward, Saad and Lloyd brought the children to their grandmother's house, where Gloria had lived for many years. There, they met with a social worker, and they made up a false story in an attempt to distract the police during the initial investigation. They fabricated a tale that claimed Gloria was using a banned substance and had fled, stating they found her in that condition without knowing what had happened. Eventually, law enforcement discovered the truth behind their fabricated account. The next day, Gloria's eldest child sought shelter from a social worker to request help and asked if he could share a secret. This secret appeared to be very traumatic, as the child clenched his fists in anger and helplessness, tears welling up in his eyes. He cried out that they had killed his mother, Gloria. Once he calmed down enough to speak, he told the social worker that Lloyd was actually very harmful. His face was filled with terror. After sharing a brief account, the boy stopped talking out of fear. However, his behavior was taken seriously, and his testimony was forwarded to the police, prompting a new direction in the investigation. The Carabinieri suspected that Gloria's husband, Hadi, may have been involved, suggesting that he had entered a phony marriage with Gloria's as part of a plot. Despite this, detectives found no evidence that he had treated either the children or his wife poorly. In fact, he seemed to interact well with everyone and was calm. However, after the marriage was registered, he showed little interest in the well-being of his wife and children. Hadi quickly confessed that he had used Gloria, marrying her without any intention of building a life together. Gloria's mother, Carmela, also corroborated this, stating that he had visited Gloria's with the children in the early days before the wedding. This behavior was intended to lower the Gloria family's guard while Lloyd carried out her malicious plan. Gloria's stepchildren were always friendly, but Hadi did not want to take on the role of a father to them. Ultimately, it was revealed that Hadi was not involved in the mistreatment of Gloria. However, he was aware of the terrible things happening to her but convinced the police that he could not change the situation. Hadi provided the police with a significant amount of helpful information that allowed them to piece together the difficult year and a half of suffering that Gloria endured before her death. While Hadi felt sympathy for Gloria, but he could not influence Saad's and Lloyd's actions in any way. At the slightest disagreement, they threatened to deport him back to his home country. According to Hadi, Gloria was under strict control and couldn't take any action without permission. Her tormentors, Saad and Lloyd, took all the money they could find, imprisoned her and her children, and they repeatedly abused her children to intimidate her into obeying their orders. Hadi stated that Gloria was so depressed recently that she hardly resisted or showed disobedience. Lloyd and Saad are clearly responsible for the abuse of Gloria and her children. Both have now been arrested and the investigation is ongoing. During this time, Lloyd and Saad began to give conflicting statements and blamed each other. Neither wanted to take responsibility for the horrific acts committed. Lloyd claimed that Saad did not respect women and treated them cruelly, stating that she had been a victim of his violence on multiple occasions. She recounted an incident during a trip to Egypt, where she said she fled after 15 days because she could no longer tolerate the disrespectful treatment of women in that country. However, Saad felt it was his duty to adhere to local customs, which led him to use violence and insults without hesitation. He was very strict and punished even the smallest mistakes, which caused Gloria and her children much suffering. The eldest child became so traumatized that he would urinate whenever he saw Saad, especially if he raised his voice or threatened punishment. Whenever Gloria resisted, Lloyd and Saad's anger would flare up, making him especially cruel during these times. The visible bruises on Gloria's body were a result of his abuse. Although Saad tried to blame Lloyd for the situation, Saad described Lloyd as cruel and unfeeling, claiming she enforced strict discipline on her niece, Gloria. She would punish harshly for minor infractions, whether it was due to not earning enough money for the day or even the slightest noise from the child. Saad attributed Lloyd's behavior to her Italian temperament, claiming she often raised her hands during arguments. Plus, Lloyd liked to provoke conflicts, often resorting to insults and physical force. This behavior contributed to her decision to leave Egypt, as she wanted to maintain a good reputation in front of her family. Detectives believed both Lloyd and Saad were responsible for the tragic incident that unfolded. If Lloyd was indeed a victim in her relationship with Saad, she could have sought help when he left for his homeland. Instead, she continued to harm Gloria. Saad, on the other hand, would not have returned to Lloyd if he was unhappy, yet he chose to maintain their relationship and came back to her after his trip. This suggests that both were complicit in their actions and share the blame. A few people who knew Gloria well reported that Gloria wanted to find a decent job to support herself and raise her children properly, but she was never given the opportunity. Her tormentors inflicted psychological harm on her young children. The older child, in particular, struggled with issues stemming from years of violence. The children witnessed their mother being beaten multiple times and were also subjected to regular beatings themselves. Whenever the children cried, they were punished further, with unreasonable demands for them to be silent. According to Gloria's eldest son, once when he witnessed another conflict, he became so frightened that he urinated and started crying. This infuriated Saad even more. He picked up the child and slammed him hard onto the floor. Following this incident, the child fell ill for an extended period. They simply placed him on the couch and did not seek medical attention. During the trial, Lloyd stated that Gloria, the children's mother, had been in a downward spiral and started engaging in prostitution at the age of 14. However, social workers who had been observing Gloria since her childhood contradicted this claim. They indicated that Lloyd's statements were part of a fabricated story intended to lessen her own punishment. Tragically, after a year and a half of violence, the situation culminated on August 27, 2017, when Gloria were brutally murdered in front of her children. Lloyd Del Preetva Saad Mohammed Alesh Salem were convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to 24 years in prison, although the prosecutor had sought a harsher penalty. On May 11, 2021, their sentence was reviewed and reduced to 20 years. The court determined that social services did not properly handle the complaints about abuse Gloria's. Neighbors had reported troubling behavior, but social service workers only provided minimal assistance. Gloria's children were eventually adopted by another family, and the request for custody from their grandmother was denied. Nevertheless, Gloria's mother remains determined and continues to fight for custody of her grandchildren. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Schmidt family. Tyler Schmidt was born on November 13, 1979, in Iowa, USA. He spent his childhood in Cedar Falls, a city home to the University of Northern Iowa. Tyler's early interests led him to join the Boy Scouts, where he earned the distinguished rank of Eagle Scout. This experience fostered his lasting love for nature and the outdoors. Growing up, Tyler enjoyed participating in camps organized by the Lutheran Church, which often brought his family together. Outside of school, he developed skills in playing the trumpet. However, his true passions lay in adventure and sports. At Northern Iowa High School in Cedar Falls, Tyler was a member of the cross-country running team and the swim team. During his free time, he also enjoyed outdoor activities such as canoeing, hiking, and snowshoeing. Tyler's interest in computing led him to Missouri's Truman State University, where he pursued a degree in computer science and met the woman who would become his wife, Sarah. Born in Kansas City on March 27, 1980, Sarah grew up near St. Louis with her siblings, Karen, Jane, and Adam, for part of her childhood. Sarah shared Tyler's passion for the outdoors, particularly bird watching and studying insects. Both had been heavily involved in scouting as young people, with Sarah earning the Girl Scouts' highest honor, the Gold Award. She credited her adventurous spirit to her mother, with whom she had gone backpacking in Central America. Given their compatibility and mutual interests, Tyler knew he had found his soulmate when he met Sarah. Sarah was a high-achieving student who excelled both academically and in leadership. As a result of her outstanding leadership skills, the prestigious Truman Scholarship while she was still at Washington High School in Washington, Missouri. This scholarship led her to attend Truman State University, where she met her future husband, Tyler. The couple started dating and eventually got engaged. Both families were supportive of their decision to marry, as they believed the two were meant to be together and start a beautiful family. On June 22, 2002, friends and family gathered at St. John Lutheran Church in Cedar Falls for Tyler and Sarah's special day. Guests took their seats under the guidance of the wedding coordinators, with Tyler's parents and Sarah's mother seated at the front, joined by her nearby siblings. Tyler's uncles and cousins were also in attendance. Sarah stood outside, preparing to make her grand entrance at her wedding ceremony. She was accompanied by her father, who would escort her down the aisle and give her away to her fiancé. The ceremony was a promise of love and commitment between the 22-year-old couple, who vowed to stand by each other until the end of their lives. Following the wedding, Tyler and Sarah embarked on a romantic 10-day honeymoon to the breathtaking Boundary Waters, a wilderness area on the U.S.-Canada border, situated between Minnesota and Ontario. This destination was chosen for its natural beauty, reflecting the couple's shared love of nature. After Tyler and Sarah got married, they focusing on building economic stability and advancing their careers. Following the completion of their bachelor's degrees in Missouri, they relocated to Lawrence and attended the University of Kansas. There, Sarah pursued a master's degree and later worked as a computer science expert, while Tyler divided his time among various roles, including jobs at a supermarket, a delivery company, UPS, and 18 years at a company that handled business billing and payments. During their early years of marriage, Tyler and Sarah maintained a balance between their professional lives and personal adventures. They made time for each other and regularly explored new outdoor destinations. The couple was social and enjoyed hosting family game nights and gathering with friends to play board games. They also participated in local community activities through the Lutheran Church and actively supported the Kansas Jayhawks basketball team, often attending tournaments at the Allen Fieldhouse. 2013 is a bittersweet year for Tyler and Sarah. It was the year Sarah's father unexpectedly passed away due to a heart attack, causing immense grief for his loved ones. However, in the same year, they welcomed their first child, Arlo, after 11 years of marriage. In 2015, the family grew again, with the birth of their beautiful daughter, Lula Schmidt, on September 17. 3 years later, when their children were 6 and 3, the family decided to relocate to Cedar Falls to be near Tyler's relatives. The community of Cedar Falls provided them a warm welcome, and they quickly became involved in local activities. Tyler maintained his software engineering job, while Sarah started working as a librarian's assistant at the local public library. Their children, Arlo and Lula, began attending preschool at Lincoln Elementary School. Known for their kind and helpful nature, Tyler and Sarah made those around them feel valued. This endearing quality earned them the love and respect of their neighbors and the community. Sarah's friendly and warm personality also made her a beloved figure at the library, where she was admired by colleagues and patrons alike. Tyler and Sarah made it a priority to share their love for the outdoors with their children, Arlo and Lula, encouraging them to explore and appreciate nature. In 2021, the family began going on camping trips, which the kids greatly enjoyed, even with their busy schedules. As a result, they decided to go on these trips as often as possible. However, by mid-2022, Sarah's work hours had increased substantially, which may have affected their ability to continue this family tradition. However, in June 2022, she took a day off to celebrate a special milestone, her 20th wedding anniversary. She also planned a family vacation to Mata Cave State Park in Jackson County, Iowa, for the week of July 11th. To make time for this trip, she set a deadline for a library project. July 26th, Sarah shared her plans with her sister-in-law, Kat, and was looking forward to exploring the park's 13 remarkable caves and beautiful landscapes with her family. On Thursday, July 21st, the Schmidt family embarked on a 140-mile road trip to visit Makata Caves. The family, consisting of Tyler and Sarah, both 42, and their children Arlo, 9, and Lula, 7, arrived at the campsite before 5 p.m. due to the crowded camping area. The Schmidts decided to set up their tent near the park's entrance. Later that evening, around 7 p.m., another family, the Sherwins, arrived and parked approximately 200 feet away from the Schmidts' tent. Joe, Cecilia, and their 23-year-old son, Anthony, from Nebraska, had been on a week-and-a-half-long camping trip that took them to Michigan's Upper Peninsula. When they were on their way back home, they decided to stop at Makata Caves, setting up 2 tents, one for the parents and another for their son Anthony. Anthony consistently showed great care and consideration for his parents' needs, and earning praise from his mother, who frequently described him as the ideal son, kind, empathetic, and an outstanding student. At the time, Anthony was working on a business venture that involved developing a computer system. He claimed the business had the potential to generate millions and planned to use some of the profits to support his parents financially. However, Cecilia knew very little about the project, as Anthony maintained secrecy and only revealed that he communicated via emails that were heavily encrypted and secure. At Makata Caves, campers had settled in for the night. However, their peaceful night's sleep was disrupted before dawn on July 22nd by the sudden sound of gunshots. A short time earlier, a man wearing black had entered the Schmidt family's tent. Inside, the attacker targeted Tyler and then Sarah. Arlo, who had been asleep, was jolted awake by the screams of his sister Lula. As he turned to see what was happening, he saw blood and was overcome with fear. Managing to escape the tent, Arlo ran to find help. As he fled, he heard the sound of one final gunshot. Cecilia and Joe, from the adjacent campsite, quickly exited their tent due to the commotion. Joe began searching for his son among the other campers, inquiring if anyone had seen him. Meanwhile, Arlo, still panicked, continued running until he met Cecilia and Joe. He was frantic, shouting and asking for help, explaining that his parents had been shot. Concerned for Arlo's safety, Cecilia took his hand, and together they rushed to the park entrance. She was filled with anxiety, knowing her own son was sleeping near the tent where the shots were fired, and feared he might have been hurt or worse. Cecilia called 911 after hearing gunshots and reported the incident to the operator, but struggled to clearly say the park's name, making it difficult to communicate their exact location. Cecilia also explained that she was with a boy who claimed his parents had been shot. During the 23-minute call, the 911 operator asked Cecilia questions, while simultaneously relaying the attack to police and park rangers. The call was briefly dropped, but Cecilia quickly called back. Despite the chaotic situation and her own nervousness, Cecilia managed to remain calm, thanks in part to adrenaline. Once she had provided more specific location details, Cecilia handed the phone to Arlo. Arlo explained to the operator that he had witnessed a horrific scene at his family's campsite. He said the operator that he was in a tent with his parents and sister, but when he woke up, he saw a person wearing black and holding a gun. When asked about his father's location, the boy was silent for a while, then responding that he thought his father was hurt. At 6:30 a.m., police and paramedics arrived, and after locating the Schmidt's tent, they discovered a horrific scene. All the occupants, including Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, were dead. This previously peaceful campsite had quickly become a crime scene. Police immediately launched a search for the shooter, who could potentially still be in the area. Following the attack, authorities promptly evacuated everyone from Makata Caves State Park and nearby Camp Shalom, a Christian summer camp about 1.5 miles away. The evacuees were assembled outside the park for a head count, which revealed that only one person, Anthony Sherwin, was missing. It was also discovered that Anthony was armed. An aerial search by police helicopters led to the discovery of a man's body at 11 a.m. Once officers reached the location, they found the man was deceased. He was identified as Anthony Sherwin. Preliminary investigations pointed to Anthony as the primary suspect in the murders. Authorities believed he had perpetrated the attack on the Schmidt family before taking his own life. The park was temporarily closed by authorities following the incident, with the closure lifted by July 28. The Iowa Department of Natural Resources offered its condolences for what had occurred. A spokesperson for the department expressed deep sadness and disappointment on behalf of the team, acknowledging that the incident had disrupted the long-standing tradition of Iowa families enjoying the state's natural beauty. However, the department remains committed to continuing its work in preserving the state's parks for the millions of families that visit each year. The citizens of Cedar Falls were deeply shocked when they received the news. The atmosphere in the town drastically somber and mournful. Family, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers were filled with grief. A heartfelt message was displayed in a window at the Cedar Falls Public Library, where Sarah had worked, paying tribute to Tyler, Sarah, and Lula, saying they may have left too soon, but their memories would remain forever in the hearts of those who knew them. After hearing of the tragedy, Tyler's software company mourned him, describing him as a highly skilled and dedicated professional who mentored his colleagues. His colleagues were deeply saddened by the news, remembering Tyler's love for his children, especially his child Arlo. The mayor of Cedar Falls shared his grief on Facebook over the loss of the 3 Schmidt family members. He knew Sarah, with whom he had worked on a technology project in the past. He called on the community to support Arlo, the sole survivor of the family, and shared a GoFundMe link for those wishing to donate. The initiative quickly raised more than $276,000 in just a few days. As a sign of respect for Sarah's co-workers, the local authority closed the library for the remainder of the day. The tragedy also drew reactions from other government leaders. The governor of Iowa conveyed her shock and sorrow over the unimaginable tragedy, while a U.S. House representative from Iowa denounced the crime as senseless and horrific. Sarah's family was deeply saddened by her passing. Her sister was particularly hard hit, finding it impossible to accept that she would no longer be able to talk to Sarah and that she would miss out on seeing her niece grow up. Family members came from as far away as North Dakota, Texas, and Michigan to attend a private funeral service for Sarah at Greenwood Cemetery on August 2nd. A separate celebration of the lives of Tyler, Sarah, and Lula was held at the picnic area of Overman Park, attracting more than 200 people. At the ceremony, Tyler's aunt and the mayor took turns speaking at the podium to express their feelings and share memories of the deceased. The Schmidt family's loved ones struggled to cope with their grief, also as trying to provide comfort and care to Arlo. Meanwhile, authorities pressed on with their investigation into the brutal crime. According to an official update from the Iowa Department of Public Safety, the autopsies revealed crucial information about the victims' causes of death. Tyler sustained both a gunshot wound and multiple sharp force injuries. His wife, Sarah, had multiple sharp force injuries, but no gunshot wound. Tragically, their young daughter, Lula, suffered both a gunshot wound and was strangled. In August 2022, authorities identified Anthony Sherwin, a 23 years old with no prior crimes, as the person responsible for the Schmidt family's murder. He acted alone and later ended his own life. Despite the thorough investigation, police were unable to determine a motive for the attack. According to the Assistant Director of Criminal Investigation, Anthony had no connection to the Schmidt family before or during the time the two parties camped near each other. The Nebraska Police Department helped investigate the incident. During a search of the Sherwin family's apartment in Nebraska, officers did not find a suicide note or any other clues that could explain why Anthony targeted the Schmidt family and himself. A review of Anthony's Facebook page also did not provide any information about the incident or the weapons used. According to the Assistant Director of the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, the only confirmed weapon found was an unlicensed, hand-assembled firearm discovered near Anthony's body. This type of firearm is often referred to as a ghost gun. Because these guns lack serial numbers, they can be challenging for authorities to track and regulate. To verify the story, the police spoke with Anthony's parents. They confirmed that their son had created his own gun using instructions he found online. His parents described Anthony as very responsible and stressed that he had never hurt anyone or any animals. They also shared that their family had never owned guns before, but due to increasing crime rates in Nebraska, they had recently decided to acquire them. As they were inexperienced with firearms, they even took classes to learn how to handle them. The parents Anthony's had brought a homemade gun on the trip for protection against crime and possible bear attacks, which they had previously encountered while camping. They planned to dispose of the gun after returning home. Anthony's parents believed he was innocent and wanted to prove it. They thought he was a victim of murder, not the killer. His mother pointed to an autopsy report they obtained, which showed he had been shot twice. This contradicted the police claim that he had been shot only once. Anthony's mother questioned how he could have shot himself twice, which raised doubts about the police theory that he had taken his own life. The family Anthony's questioned the attacker's clothing description, as Cecilia remembered telling the 911 operator that the attacker wore black clothes. This did not match Anthony's clothes, green shorts that she had given him the day before the incident. Furthermore, Cecilia and Joe believe the police have withheld important information from them, such as where Anthony's body was found and whether the gun used to kill the family Schmidts was the same gun used to shoot Anthony. They specifically asked investigators if a ballistic test was conducted to confirm any matches, but received no response. Cecilia expressed her concerns in an email to the media. In the email, she said that her son had so many reasons to live, and she was sure that he would not give up everything in such a way. Cecilia also mentioned that she had seen no signs of him planning such an attack. And in her opinion, Anthony did not have the capability to kill. Furthermore, she believed that her son had no connection to the Schmidt family, which raised more questions. When Cecilia reached out to investigators, their response only added to her confusion. They simply mentioned that it was a random murder. Anthony's parents asked to see the final investigation report so they could arrange for a private review to be conducted. However, they state that they never received a response to this request. Around the same time, in January 2023, a news organization also requested public documents related to the case, but was still waiting for them. According to Iowa's Open Records Law and the Freedom of Information Act, a request was made for various documents related to the case, including incident reports, investigation files, crime scene summaries, and autopsy reports. However, the Iowa Department of Public Safety Commissioner's office responded that these documents were not publicly available. They could only release basic information about the case, which had already been included in the press release and its supplementary links. A few days after the inquiry, the media outlet sent an email to the official asking if the gun Anthony used to kill himself was the same one used in the Schmidt family murders or not. The official did not respond. So far, the police believe Anthony was a random killer who brutally murdered family Schmidt by shooting, stabbing, and strangling them. This conviction stands unless new evidence surfaces to prove otherwise. Anthony was also murdered, and those who knew him described him as kind, studious, and innocent. Following traumatic incident, Arlo, the the sole survivor of a massacre, came to live with his relatives in Cedar Falls, CU the law entre qua Sarah. Recently, in an interview, Sarah's brother expressed admiration for Arlo's courage and the young boy's remarkable mental resilience. Following the tragedy, a fundraising page on GoFundMe was established to collect money for Arlo's care and to create a fund that will support his future education. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Johnson. In the quiet town of Bellevue, Idaho, a typical Tuesday morning on September 2, 2003, turned into a chaotic scene. At 6:20 a.m., residents were jolted by the sound of gunshots, followed by the wailing of sirens as sheriff's deputies from Blake County rushed to the Johnson residence. Inside the house, officers found a gruesome scene. Diane Johnson had been shot once in the head and was found in bed, while her husband Alan Johnson lay dead on the floor, having been shot once in the chest. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah was left shaken but unharmed after a traumatic event. As detectives investigated the scene, they discovered surprising secrets that ultimately led to a stunning discovery. But who had Sarah's parents, Diane and Alan, wronged, and what series of events led to their heartbreaking deaths? A frantic 911 call was made after a neighbor reported a horrific crime. The caller stated that a 16-year-old girl, Sarah Johnson, had arrived at her doorstep, frantically screaming that her parents had been shot. The caller reported hearing 2 gunshots. According to the neighbor, Kim, Sarah had run to her house in a state of panic, claiming that her parents, Diane and Alan Johnson, had been murdered. The police and emergency responders were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, law enforcement officials entered the house and were met with a disturbing scene. They found Diane, 52, in bed with a fatal gunshot wound to her head. It appeared that she had been killed while she was asleep. The walls and ceiling near the headboard were splattered with blood, and a fragment of her skull was found on the floor. Alan's body was found on the floor beside Diane's side of the bed. He was wearing only a towel, and a large pool of blood had formed around him. Initially, police thought they had a clear-cut murder-suicide case. However, as they took a closer look at the crime scene, their theory quickly unraveled. At the scene, investigators noticed the sound of running water and followed the trail of blood to the adjacent bathroom. The shower was still on. Once they turned off the water, they observed blood splatter on the walls and a single bullet hole in the shower wall. The officers then expanded their search of the house for more evidence. In the bedroom where Diane's body was found, investigators discovered what they believed to be the murder weapon, a .264 caliber Winston rifle, on the floor. At the foot of the bed, 2 kitchen knives were also discovered. Another knife was found on the bed of the Johnson's son, Matt. The placement of these knives baffled investigators. The presence of the knives at the scene raised many questions. It was unclear why they were placed in such a deliberate manner, and what significance they held. A further peculiarity was the lack of forced entry, which suggested that the killer may have been someone familiar with the family's habits. Specifically, the fact that the Johnsons rarely locked their doors, a detail known only to those close to them, seemed particularly relevant. Additionally, the house showed no signs of having been ransacked, which contradicted the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Sarah told police she was asleep when she heard a gunshot. She immediately got up and ran to her parents' bedroom to call out for her mother. That's when she heard a second gunshot. Fearful for her safety, Sarah rushed to her neighbor's house for help. She didn't see the person who fired the shots. Her neighbor, Kim Richards, backed up Sarah's account and was the one who called 911. On the property was a separate guest house that belonged to a family friend, 45-year-old Mel Spiegel. As investigators entered the house, they discovered a crucial piece of evidence on the bed, the scope from the rifle found at the crime scene. However, Mel Spiegel was unexpectedly absent. His sudden disappearance raised suspicions, making him a person of interest for the investigators. Sergeant Walt Femling ordered the property sealed off and instructed officers to stop the waste disposal truck from collecting trash. A critical piece of evidence was nearly collected and taken away, but a deputy intervened just in time, stopping the truck just a house away. The theory was that Mel had a confrontation with Alan and Diane, which escalated into a violent argument, resulting in their deaths. As investigators explored this possibility, forensic teams searched the trash cans and found additional evidence. Inside a bundled-up pink bathrobe, they discovered a latex glove, a single brown leather glove matching the one found in the Johnsons' bedroom, and ammunition for a .25 caliber gun. The evidence was carefully tagged and sent for DNA testing. As investigators pieced together their own scenario, it became clear that the killer likely had prior knowledge of the Johnsons' unlocked doors and the trash collection schedule. It was possible that the killer disposed of the evidence in the trash before fleeing the scene after the double homicide. Mel was located in Boise, Idaho. He voluntarily met with investigators at the Boise police station. The investigators inquired about Mel's activities earlier that day, and Mel stated that he had spent the weekend with his family. He was planning to return to Bell in a week. To verify Mel's alibi, investigators contacted his family members, who confirmed that he was indeed with them. During the conversation, Mel discussed his relationship with Alan and Diane, explaining that he had rented the guest house from they for years. Mel described his relationship with they as close and very good. When questioned about the rifle used in the murders, Mel acknowledged that it was his, but claimed it had been stored in his closet before he left for Boise over the weekend. Investigators then inquired about potential enemies of they. Mel shared that Alan and Diane had been concerned about their daughter Sarah's relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, who was allegedly living in the country without proper documentation and selling drugs. Mel specifically mentioned Bruno Santos as someone investigators should look into. Mel encouraged investigators to talk to other family members, leading them to reconstruct the Johnson family's history. Here's what they discovered. Alan and Diane Johnson's relationship began in the early 1980s. At the time, Diane was a single mother to a toddler son, Matt, from a previous relationship. They got married in 1983, and Alan adopted Matt as his own son. The family settled in a beautiful home in the quiet city of Bell, Idaho. In 1987, they welcomed a new addition, a daughter named Sarah Johnson, born on January 25. Their children, Matt and Sarah, were both doing well in their studies. Matt, who was 22 at the time, was a university student at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Sarah was not only excelling in her schoolwork, but was also an accomplished athlete on her school's volleyball team and received adoring attention from her father Alan. The investigators had been ruling out potential suspects and were about to reveal underlying family conflicts that had been escalating over the past few months. With Mel cleared as a suspect, the Johnson family was known to be happy and loving, but things changed when Sarah started dating Bruno Santos. Investigators interviewed the family members, including Matt, the son who had returned home from university, and Diane's sister and brother-in-law, Linda and Jim Fave. All of them described the family life as happy and normal until Sarah and Bruno became a couple. According to Matt, Linda, and Jim, Sarah's relationship with Bruno caused significant tension in the family, which escalated over the months leading up to the murder. Sarah resisted her parents' rules, particularly when they forbade her from seeing Bruno again. Despite this, she continued to defy them. Jim revealed to investigators that Bruno had a potential motive to murder Diane and Alan. A few days before the murders, Alan and Diane had discovered that Sarah had lied about sleeping over at a friend's house. In reality, she had spent the night with Bruno. Alan informed Jim about the situation and asked him to join them in confronting Bruno. Jim informed investigators that Alan was enraged and threatened to report Bruno to the police for assaulting underage Sarah. The three then left together. A charge of this severity could result in Bruno's deportation. After hearing Jim's account, investigators suspected that Bruno had a strong motive to harm the Johnsons. They decided it was time to speak with Bruno. Santos County Police were familiar with Bruno Santos, a high school dropout with a history of minor drug-related offenses. When questioned, Bruno became confrontational and arrogant, making it challenging for investigators to deal with him. During questioning, Bruno claimed he had recently proposed to Sarah, and she had accepted. It's thought that Bruno made this claim to demonstrate his love for Sarah and prove that he wouldn't have done anything to harm their relationship. When investigators inquired about his whereabouts on the morning of the murders, Bruno said he was sleeping on the couch at his residence. He suggested that officers contact his mother, who confirmed that she was also at home with him at the time. Despite this, his alibi was not considered particularly solid. When investigators questioned Bruno about the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson, Bruno expressed his hatred for Alan and Diane Johnson. Bruno was initially the prime suspect because of his obvious motive. He was angry with the Johnson family, especially Diane, Sarah's mother. By killing the Johnsons, Bruno hoped to be with Sarah. The investigation into Bruno's involvement in the Alan and Diane Johnson murders took a significant step forward when a search warrant was executed at his home. As a result, the clothing and shoes he wore on the day of the incident were seized for forensic testing. Additionally, Bruno's fingerprints were taken to compare with any prints found at the crime scene. A DNA sample was also collected from Bruno at the hospital, along with hair clippings and scrapings from his hands. Based on the evidence gathered, Bruno was identified as the primary suspect in the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson. Despite thorough investigation, forensic experts found no evidence linking Bruno to the crime scene. Neither Diane's nor Alan's blood was found on Bruno's clothes or shoes, and no DNA, hair, or fingerprints from the accused were detected near the bodies. Additionally, no physical evidence placed Bruno in their room. The gloves and bathrobe tested negative for any incriminating evidence. The crime scene yielded no DNA or fingerprints from Bruno, and no blood or DNA from the victims was found on his clothing. Bruno was eventually ruled out as a suspect in the case. As investigators took a closer look, their attention turned to someone else. They began to question Sarah's family and friends more thoroughly about her home life and personal relationships. This led to the discovery that Sarah had been prescribed antidepressants and that her relationship with her parents was strained. Her family members had initially dismissed her behavior as typical for a teenager, assuming she was going through a normal phase of rebellion and testing boundaries with her parents. Linda, Sarah's aunt, grew increasingly suspicious of her niece's behavior in the aftermath of her parents' deaths. She reported to investigators that Sarah was not exhibiting the typical signs of grieving and instead seemed more focused on returning to her normal routine with friends and school. Sarah showed little emotional response to the loss of her parents, which Linda found unusual and even alarming. Her reactions seemed remarkably detached and strange. This raised more questions, prompting investigators to speak with some of Sarah's friends to gather more insight into her behavior following the tragic events. It was clear to everyone that Sarah did not show enough concern about the deaths of Alan and Diane Johnson. In fact, she seemed more focused on her own appearance, particularly getting her nails painted. What struck investigators as unusual, however, was Sarah's reaction to Bruno's arrest. Instead of being angry, she appeared to be worried about him, which seemed odd given that he was suspected of killing her parents. This remark led investigators to consider Sarah as a potential suspect, the most worrying aspect being that Sarah could commit such a heinous crime. The Johnsons' home remained an active crime scene, with investigators now focusing on Sarah's room as a second key area of interest. A question had arisen about how the blood splatter had traveled such a distance. To address this, a gun expert was brought in to examine the splatter pattern more closely. After analyzing the trajectory from Alan and Diane's room to Sarah's, the expert determined that both bedroom doors were open at the time of the shooting. This conclusion was supported by the presence of blood deposits on the back edge of Sarah's door, where the hinges are located, suggesting that the door was open, allowing the projectile to enter her bedroom. This meant that both bedroom doors, as well as Sarah's door, were open, and there was a hallway in between. During the investigation, plumbers were called to the scene to address a clogged toilet in one of the bathrooms. The clog was found to be caused by a shower cap. As a result, investigators decided to question Linda, Matt, and Mel Spiegel about some of the evidence they had discovered. Both Matt and Linda identified a pink bathrobe as belonging to Sarah. Mel Spiegel confirmed that Sarah had a key to the guest house. He also revealed that Sarah was aware of the gun stored in the closet. However, investigators faced a challenge in linking Sarah to the evidence. Eyewitnesses reported that Sarah did not have any visible blood on her when she ran to a neighbor's house for help on the morning of the murders. Forensic experts used luminol to test Sarah's clothes for blood splatter, but found none. Despite this, investigators obtained a warrant to seize and test the clothes Sarah was wearing that morning. Meanwhile, investigators asked Sarah to return for another interview to determine if her account had changed since they last spoke. They had noticed small inconsistencies in her previous statements. When questioned again, investigators found that Sarah's story had altered significantly. Specifically, they identified at least 5 changes to her explanations. In some instances, she claimed to have been asleep and was awoken by the sound of a gunshot, but her story varied across different interviews. When questioned about the door to her parents' room, Sarah struggled to recall whether it was open or closed at the time of the shooting. Despite Sarah's inconsistencies, investigators maintained a calm demeanor during questioning to avoid raising her suspicions. They were already aware that both bedroom doors were open, which was the only explanation for the blood splatter on Sarah's bedroom wall. As part of the investigation to clear her name, Sarah was asked to provide a DNA sample, hair samples, and hand scrapings, all of which were sent to the lab for testing. The pajama top and bottom she was wearing on the morning of the murders were also sent to the lab for examination by forensic specialist Rod Engard. Under a high-powered microscope, Engard found no blood on the front of the robe. However, on the back of the garment, he discovered patterns of high-velocity blood splatter. These stains were extremely small, some even smaller than a pencil mark, and were layered on top of each other, indicating a high-energy impact. He discovered blue cotton fibers and green paint specks on the inside of the robe that matched the shirt Sarah wore that morning. However, the most incriminating evidence was yet to come. Lab results confirmed that Sarah's DNA was found on the inner lining of the latex glove, and gun residue was detected on both pairs of the brown leather gloves. The robe, leather gloves, and latex gloves were sent to a lab in Chicago, Kahn and Associates, for further analysis. The lab found gunshot residue on all 3 items. The blood on the gloves and robe belonged to both Alan and Diane. This evidence was sufficient for investigators to arrest and charge Sarah with the double homicide of Alan and Diane Johnson on October 29, 2003. Sarah Johnson was arrested for the murders of her parents, Alan and Diane Johnson, and was held without bail at the Blake County Jail awaiting trial. The shocking crime made headlines across the country, captivating the nation's attention and sparking a media frenzy. To build a case against Sarah, investigators and prosecutors had to create a convincing argument that demonstrated her motivation and capability to commit such a horrific crime. Sarah's parents disapproved of her relationship with Bruno from the start. As a result, Sarah began sneaking around behind their backs and acting out in typical teenage fashion. However, the turning point came just a few days before the murders. A heated argument with her parents drove Sarah to desperation. She had lied about staying with a friend, when in reality she was with Bruno. Her father's threats to have Bruno charged with assault and deported to Mexico pushed Sarah to the edge. Investigators and prosecutors believe that this was the moment Sarah hatched a plan to eliminate her parents and start a new life with Bruno. On the morning of the murders, she went to the guest house to retrieve the rifle, setting the events in motion. Sarah carefully prepared herself to commit the crime by putting on latex gloves, leather gloves, and a shower cap to prevent blood from getting on her hair and clothes. She then went to her parents' room, where she shot her mother, Diane, in the head while she was asleep. When her father, Alan, got out of the shower and opened the bathroom door, Sarah shot him in the chest. After killing her parents, Sarah attempted to make it look like an intruder had committed the crime by placing knives in the bedrooms. She then gathered up the evidence and threw it away in the trash, hoping that the waste disposal company would collect it before investigators could find it. However, she made a critical mistake by not considering the evidence that would be found in her own room. Additionally, the shower cap she had worn became lodged in a plumbing system, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence. The evidence against Sarah Johnson was overwhelming, and her trial began in February 2005, 2 years after her parents' murders. At 18 years old, Sarah stood accused of killing her parents. Her defense team maintained that Sarah was innocent and that an intruder had committed the crime. However, the prosecution was well prepared to present their case. They introduced physical evidence found at the crime scene and testimonies from family and friends that raised suspicions about Sarah's behavior. On the morning of the murders, there were 3 people in the Johnson household: Alan, Diane, and Sarah. 2 of them did not survive. The one person who did come out alive was Sarah Johnson, who was now sitting in the courtroom. The most damaging testimony came from Bruno Santos, who not only sought to clear his own name in the murder trial but also provided the jury with insight into Sarah's state of mind before the murders. Bruno testified that he and Sarah had planned to get married and that she had described a future where they would live together in a beautiful house, happy with just each other. He also revealed that Sarah frequently expressed her hatred for her father and even talked about shooting him. After 5 weeks of testimony, evidence, and explanations of the crime scene, the jury delivered its verdict on March 16, 2005. Sarah, 18, was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho. Despite making multiple appeals to reduce her sentence, Sarah remains in custody as all her appeals have been denied. Following her sentencing, her family members have publicly expressed their feelings about Sarah and her actions. The murders of Alan and Diane have had a devastating impact on their family, with most members believing that Sarah is responsible and deserves her punishment. Sarah's brother, Matt, has stated that Sarah showed no remorse for killing their parents and believes that if given a second chance, she would try to avoid being caught again. At the sentencing hearing, Pat Dishman, Diane's mother, addressed Sarah directly. She told her granddaughter that despite everything, they still loved her. However, her actions had left a devastating impact on their entire family. "We'd been absolutely destroyed by the loss of your Alan and Diane, and it was even harder to come to terms with the fact that it was you who did it." Alan's sister Lynn expressed her concerns about Sarah's character, stating that she is spoiled and violent, and capable of committing murder if released from prison. Lynn urged the judge to consider keeping Sarah incarcerated permanently. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Dawn Carlin. From a young age, she enjoyed being in front of the camera, whether it was being photographed or videotaped. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City. Although she had a stable job, her true aspiration was to become a model. Christina's determination eventually paid off, and she achieved some success in the modeling industry. In her promotional materials, she expressed her love for posing in elegant lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend Christina met while working on a 3-day photo shoot for Maxim magazine, Christina was a charming and beautiful person with a great sense of humor. With her dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the qualities of a fashion model. Christina's ultimate goal was to appear on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while still working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, Christina met Alex Caiatelli, and they soon began dating. Alex supports Christina's ambitions and never hindered her career. They got engaged after a long relationship. During this time, Christina became Cyber Girl of the Month in May 2009, earning an invitation to the Playboy Mansion, where she attended exclusive events and experienced luxury. At the height of her career, Christina's ambitions soared, particularly after meeting Hugh Hefner. Unfortunately, despite her efforts, she failed to secure a modeling contract with Playboy magazine, a highly competitive opportunity that only one girl among thousands of applicants can attain. Christina faced significant obstacles in becoming a top model at that time. One major issue was her age. At 26, she was considered too old for certain magazines that typically feature younger models. Despite this, she continued to work hard, landing jobs with prominent companies like Redken, Maxim, Victoria's Secret, and Vanity Fair. Determined to advance her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, her decision to pose for Playboy proved to be a setback. Many brands were hesitant to work with her after the explicit photo shoot, and her career began to decline. Eventually, it came to a complete halt. It was a challenging time for Christina, but she was grateful to have Alex's support to help her through it. Christina was a woman known for both her physical beauty and her controversial behavior. In 2016, she caused a disturbance at the Schmidt, a New York restaurant. Following the incident, the New York Post published several articles about what had happened. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, was dining at the Schmidt with a male friend on March 6 when an argument broke out over the bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager, Sergei Anakin, intervened. Christina, who was reportedly intoxicated, claimed the manager had pushed her, but a video of the incident showed that was not true. During the altercation, Christina allegedly hit a police officer on the neck, causing redness and significant pain. She was subsequently charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, after the district attorney offered her a deal, the charges were dropped on the condition that she stayed out of trouble for 6 months. Christina's lawyer explained that she accepted a reasonable deal offered by the district attorney. Christina had always been fond of Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, where she felt a strong sense of safety. Considering this, Alex purchased an apartment for her in Ardmore, and they of them relocated to Pennsylvania in 2018. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore did not live up to her expectations of being a safe haven. In fact, on August 18, 2018, she reported a robbery to the police. Christina spent the evening at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night are hazy. The next morning, she woke up with no recollection of how she got home or if anyone was with her. She suspected that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. Feeling scared, she confided in others about her concerns. Her partner, Alex, was away on a business trip at the time, which added to her anxiety. The police investigation into the incident uncovered CCTV footage that showed a car arriving at Christina's apartment building around 3 a.m. The footage revealed that Christina was unconscious in the back seat. The driver, who was later identified as the perpetrator, took Christina's keys from her purse and entered her apartment. Once inside, the thief stole over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer handbags, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The perpetrator spent about an hour and a half in Christina's apartment before returning to the car. He then helped Christina out of the vehicle and into her apartment building, leaving her in the hallway. The thief put the keys back in Christina's purse and drove away, leaving her disoriented and frightened. The police were able to identify the perpetrator of the robbery with the help of a credit card statement. The culprit was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. At the time of the robbery, Melton was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with a Virginia license plate. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17, a sighting confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. As the police searched for Melton and worked to recover Christina's stolen belongings, a far more serious crime occurred. On August 22, 2018, Alex Cayatelli called the police to ask them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her. When he arrived home, he found the apartment door locked from the inside. A review of the security system revealed that someone had opened the front door and balcony door overnight. The police were forced to break down the front door to gain entry. Upon entering the apartment, they immediately discovered a crime scene, with a body on the bed covered in a blanket and blood visible. Christina Carlin Craft's brutally beaten body was discovered under a blanket. She had suffered severe injuries, including a broken nose and strangulation marks on her neck. When Christina's identity was confirmed, the news of her death was devastating to Alex. As the police investigated further, they couldn't rule out the possibility that Alex might be involved in her murder. After all, the closest people to the victim are often the prime suspects. Christina and Alex had a long history together, and anything could have happened between them. The fact that Alex had called the police to express his concern about Christina, only to have her body discovered shortly after, raised suspicions. It was possible that Alex had staged his concern to divert attention from himself. The detectives asked him to accompany them to the police station for questioning, and Alex agreed without hesitation. Alex told investigators he had to return to New York for urgent work on August 21. On August 22, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to say goodnight, but she didn't answer. Since Christina was always awake at that hour, Alex grew concerned. He called her several more times, but got no response. He then checked the security system and found suspicious activity at the apartment that night. Alex decided to put his business on hold and return to Ardmore immediately. The police believed Alex's story and ruled him out as a suspect, as it was impossible for him to be in two places at once. His alibi checked out, and the police cleared him of any involvement in Christina's death. The main suspect in Christina's murder was initially Andre Melton, who had previously stolen valuables from her apartment. It's possible that he returned to the apartment to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Alternatively, he may have discovered that she had reported him to the police and sought revenge. On August 22, the day Christina's body was discovered, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his residence, they found some of Christina's belongings, but Melton was nowhere to be found. However, surveillance footage from the night of the crime revealed that Christina had returned to her apartment with an unknown man at 3:08 a.m., but it wasn't Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage showed that the unknown man did not leave the apartment. To investigate further, police reviewed CCTV footage from the streets of Ardmore and discovered that Christina had visited a bar in Philadelphia before returning to her apartment. At the bar, investigators found footage of Christina meeting a man who later hugged her, the same man she had returned to her apartment with. Christina and a new acquaintance hailed a taxi after leaving the bar. Detectives tracked her movements to rebuild the timeline of events leading up to her death. They eliminated Melton as a suspect since he wasn't with her that day. They still had to determine if her death was connected to the earlier robbery or just a coincidence. On August 25, the police got a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who drove Christina and her companion that night. He reported that Christina and her friend had approached him, and they didn't use the taxi app. After agreeing on a fare, they got into the taxi. According to Sanford, the couple seemed affectionate and friendly, so they didn't raise any suspicions. Sanford also remembered that when they arrived at their destination, Christina took the initiative to settle the fare. However, she didn't have any cash on her. She offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford refused. Then, Christina's friend offered him $100 if he would wait 10 to 15 minutes near the house while they went to the apartment. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her friend returned. Christina and the man entered their apartment around 3 a.m. At 4 a.m., Christina made a brief call to her cousin, but didn't speak a word. Her cousin, however, heard a man in the background instructing Christina not to call the police. The call ended abruptly, leaving the cousin unclear about what was happening. The police later determined the timeline of the crime using the apartment's door sensors, which recorded the exact times the doors were opened. The data showed that the first door opening occurred at 3:08 a.m. and the next at 5:10 a.m. Since the apartment was on the second floor, the investigators suspected that the perpetrator had left through the sliding glass door on the balcony, which was also detected by the security system around the same time. This explained why the surveillance cameras did not capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left the apartment. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment. Based on this information, the police theorized that the perpetrator escaped by jumping off the balcony. The investigation's next step was to seek the public's help through the media. After releasing the surveillance camera images, the authorities asked anyone with information to come forward. The photos showed two individuals, Andre Melton and the second person who was at Christina's apartment on the night of her death. Surprisingly, Andre Melton called the police by himself, admitting to stealing from Christina but denying involvement in her murder. On August 26, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects in the recent crime. The caller revealed that he had shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. According to the caller, the suspect had previously assaulted a woman in Love Park and molesting her. The suspect became aggressive, shouting and causing a disturbance, and was eventually hospitalized for 2 hours at a cost of $70. However, he was not identified. The caller provided more chilling information. The suspect had bragged about strangling a woman and felt proud and satisfied by the act. This new information convinced investigators that the suspect was likely responsible for the murder of Christina Carlin Craft. The police received another call from a Philadelphia relative of the suspect, who identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, a convicted felon with a history of robbery. Harris had been released from prison on July 15, just 5 weeks before Christina's murder. After studying the suspect's entire biography, it became clear that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no prior connection and had never met. As a result, the police ruled out any link between their crimes. Additionally, the police gained access to Harris's phone messages. On August 22, he texted a friend that he had met an attractive woman and was going to her apartment. On August 28, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris. It was essential to apprehend him as soon as possible, as no one knew what he might do next. However, Harris had left no trail. When investigators contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, she revealed that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. As it turned out, Harris was already on the bus when the conversation took place. The Ardor police were unable to act, and the officers wouldn't be able to catch up with him. The Pittsburgh police were their last hope. Timing was crucial, and the police investigating Christina's death contacted the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They informed the task force of the bus's expected arrival time in Pittsburgh and shared a photo of Harris, helping them plan a strategic ambush. The officers blocked off all potential escape routes and were prepared to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. As the bus approached, one of the employees spotted Harris and allowed him to disembark calmly, reducing the likelihood of panic or chaotic behavior. About 10 minutes later, a police officer intercepted Harris. Harris gave a false name when asked to identify himself. He was arrested and taken to the police station, where detectives from Philadelphia interrogated him about his involvement in Christina's case. Harris claimed that he met Christina at a bar or nightclub, where she was alone and he approached her. He admitted to being under the influence of both illegal substances and alcohol at the time. After chatting and having a drink, Christina invited him to her place. Once they arrived, Harris asked the taxi driver to wait, intending to return shortly. However, he ended up staying with Christina, and they drank multiple bottles of wine together. He claimed that they then engaged in an intimate relationship with mutual consent and used a prohibited substance. Afterward, Harris demanded that Christina pay him $1,200, which she refused. The situation escalated into a physical altercation when Christina allegedly hit Harris with a wine bottle. In response, Harris claimed he hit her in the face, causing her to fall to the floor. When Christina attempted to call for emergency assistance, Harris strangled her with sweatpants until she lost consciousness. Despite his account, several inconsistencies were found in his story. During the toxicology examination, experts found no prohibited substances in Christina's body, only alcohol. This contradicted the suspect's initial claim that he had only hit her once. When confronted with the results, Harris admitted to lying. Harris initially tried to convince detectives of his innocence, claiming Christina was fine when he left her apartment. However, during a subsequent interrogation, he fully confessed to his guilt. He explained that he had panicked after severely beating her, leaving her while she was still breathing, and covering her with a blanket to avoid the sight. Ultimately, Jonathan Harris confessed to taking Christina's life and attempting to escape detection by jumping off the balcony. Despite his earlier confession, Harris pleaded not guilty at the trial. Nevertheless, the investigators had gathered substantial evidence, making it impossible for Harris and his lawyer to win the case. The court was expected to sentence Jonathan Harris to 22 to 40 years in prison for the crime of third-degree life deprivation. However, the large amount of evidence presented by the prosecutors convinced the court that the crime was intentional, making life imprisonment a possibility. During the trial, a key witness testified against Harris. This witness had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic and had previously reported Harris to the police. Harris had confessed to the crime while in the clinic, telling the witness that he enjoyed the feeling of squeezing someone and watching them take their last breath. In the end, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to 30 years to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge handed down an additional 22 to 45-year sentence to Harris. The lengthy sentence was intended to send a message to future authorities who might consider granting him early release or pardon. In a separate case, Andre Melton was arrested in December 2018 and charged with burglarizing Carlin Craft's apartment. He was sentenced in March 2020 to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, totaling 7 years under court supervision. Before receiving his sentence, Melton apologized to Carlin Craft's family. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Steven Freeman. Steven Andrew Freeman was born on January 1, 1995, in Thomason, Georgia, to Troy and Jennifer Freeman. He and his brother Blake grew up in a happy and healthy environment with no major issues with their parents or society. Steven was known for being kind, responsive, and calm, which helped him make many friends. Steven attended Spalding High School and later studied at Gordon State College in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine Higdon, his future partner, came from a respectable family and was raised with a carefree and humorous spirit. She was creative and enjoyed putting on mini plays for her family and neighbors. Steven and Mary fell deeply in love during their senior year and remained inseparable. They shared many common interests, including a love for nature, hiking, fishing, and hunting. In 2012, Steven updated his Facebook status to reflect his relationship with Mary, and the couple frequently posted photos together. Both families accepted each other's children, and after completing their education, the young couple moved in together. Steven worked as a plumber, while Mary was a teacher's assistant and part-time salesperson. By summer 2018, Steven and Mary had been living together for 7 years, but they had not yet gotten married. On August 1, 2018, at 10:42 p.m., Mary called emergency services in a state of panic. She reported that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend while handling a Glock 43 firearm, unaware that it was loaded. When paramedics and police arrived, Mary was in shock, kneeling beside Steven's motionless body, crying and begging for help. She was eventually pulled away, allowing the officers to examine Steven and provide first aid. Despite being shot in the chest, Steven was still breathing and was rushed to Spalding Regional Hospital. Sadly, he died just before midnight. In shock and struggling to comprehend the tragedy, Mary visited the police station to give her account of the events. She claimed that the shot was accidental, explaining that there were always firearms in their home for self-defense, and that Steven would often leave a pistol on the nightstand before sleep. On the fateful evening in question, Mary Catherine claimed she only intended to hand Steven the pistol, but it accidentally discharged. She insisted she didn't know the gun was loaded and would never harm Steven, the love of her life, intentionally. However, investigators discovered signs of a struggle in the kitchen, with food and dishes scattered everywhere. Detectives Adam Trammell and Chris Wilson found Mary's story highly unlikely and decided to investigate further. They questioned Mary again, using pressure tactics to get to the truth. Eventually, Mary confessed to shooting Steven in anger during an argument. She revealed that she wanted to leave him, and the argument escalated. The investigators recorded the conversation, but unfortunately, most of the recording was lost due to technical issues. Further investigation showed that the pistol couldn't have fired accidentally, as it required a deliberate trigger pull. Moreover, the bullet's trajectory indicated that the pistol was pointed directly at Steven. The detectives also questioned Mary's behavior, suspecting she was overacting and exaggerating her distress. It was also revealed that Mary worked at a gun store where she received thorough training on handling firearms. This meant she knew how to safely handle the pistol, making the accidental discharge scenario unlikely. The investigation uncovered inconsistencies in Mary's statements, including a claim that she tossed the pistol to Steven, causing it to discharge. This contradicted her initial statement that she was simply handing him the pistol when it fired. Mary's changing statements worked against her, suggesting she was lying and trying to conceal her guilt. She was detained and charged with multiple crimes, including felony murder and aggravated assault. During the trial, Lieutenant Wilson disputed Mary's claim of an accident, instead arguing that she had planned and executed the crime deliberately. A key piece of evidence was the presence of cooking grease on the pistol's slide, which Mary explained was due to her preparing dinner for Steven that evening. Friends and relatives of the couple described their complicated and tumultuous relationship, marked by frequent arguments and instances of Mary threatening to harm Steven or herself with a weapon. Despite the complexities of the case, the evidence ultimately pointed to Mary's guilt. Steven and Mary Catherine had a tumultuous relationship, with many weapons present in their home. 2 days before the tragedy on July 30, 2018, they exchanged warm messages wishing each other a good day. However, the next day, Steven told his mother he wouldn't return home to that devil and stayed at his friend Thomas's place. On August 1, 2018, When Steven didn't come home, Mary sent him hundreds of messages begging him to return. She prepared dinner and waited for him, later learning he was at Thomas's place and going to pick him up. They encountered each other on the road, and Mary shouted that she was waiting for him at home for dinner. Steven replied that he was coming home. However, the evening ended in tragedy instead of a reconciliatory dinner. The police initially believed the case was a premeditated act driven by Mary's anger, but her defense team revealed a different side to their relationship. At her trial on June 17, 2019, Mary Catherine Higdon refused a plea deal for life imprisonment, insisting she couldn't harm Steven because he was the love of her life. Mary claimed the incident was an accident and that she loved Steven. She also accused him of abusive behavior, stating that he hit her twice and forced himself on her on the day of the tragedy. Friends and relatives testified that Mary was furious because Steven often ignored her messages and calls. On the night of the incident, Steven refused to eat the dinner Mary had prepared, which was the final straw for her. She couldn't hold back and fired at him. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including grease on the pistol and a sheet with bloodstains, showing that Steven was not attacking Mary, but was sitting still on the bed when she shot him. In court, Mary finally gave a truthful testimony, describing Steven as a harsh and controlling tyrant who had repeatedly hit, shaken, and threatened her. She confessed that he had constantly controlled and manipulated her, driving her to despair with unreasonable jealousy. The defense presented ample evidence to support her claims, including text messages that raised questions about who was the real tyrant and betrayer in the relationship. Steven's message snippets suggested that he had insulted Mary Catherine and threatened her. However, what really sparked his anger was more disturbing. According to his friends, Steven was furious with his girlfriend because he believed she had been unfaithful, which Mary denied. Mary Catherine claimed that Steven had assaulted her twice before, and she feared he would hurt her again on August 1, 2018. That's why she took action in self-defense. The defense presented an expert and close relatives of Mary who could testify to the domestic violence. Mary's sister, Sarah Higdon, confirmed that she saw bruises on Mary's arm 2 weeks before the shooting, though she regrets not taking a photo and initially believing Mary's explanation that the bruises were accidental. A tearful Mary Higdon told the jury that on the night of the incident, she decided to end things with Steven once and for all, telling him to leave the house. Steven became enraged, attacked her, and in self-defense, she grabbed the pistol from the nightstand, accidentally firing it. After Mary Catherine gave emotional testimony, the prosecution and defense teams clashed with Steven's former friends, who had been close to Mary for years, as they tried to portray their deceased friend in a positive light. Thomas Skinner, Steven's best friend, described Steven as a loyal and hard-working country boy, while portraying Mary Catherine as an obsessive and possessive girlfriend who constantly controlled and stalked him. According to Thomas, Mary Catherine and Steven's relationship had become toxic over time, with Mary threatening to end her life whenever Steven tried to leave her. He also claimed that during an argument, Mary had once pointed a pistol at her head in front of Steven. Another witness, Alicia Varela, who worked with Steven, testified that Mary would obsessively call Steven throughout the day, even when he was at work. However, during her court testimony, Mary omitted a crucial detail that prosecutor Kate Lenhard highlighted. While Mary described their interactions and how their relationship had deteriorated into physical abuse, she never mentioned the moment when she claimed to have acted in self-defense and pulled the trigger. Prosecutor Kate Lenhard was skeptical of Mary's admission, pointing out that during cross-examination, Mary never mentioned being mistreated by Steven. Lenhard repeatedly asked Mary if a woman who felt safe at home would confront her attacker late at night and bring him back home, but Mary's response was unconvincing. Lenhard then recreated the events of the accidental shooting as she believed they occurred. According to her version, Steven came home and after listening to Mary, they got into an argument because he refused to eat dinner. Enraged, Mary threw the prepared food around the kitchen. Steven tried to avoid further conflict by going to the bedroom and sitting on the bed, likely waiting for Mary to calm down. However, Mary was determined to confront him, calling out to him twice without getting a response. She then entered the bedroom and shot Steven in the left side of his neck. Kate Lenhard pointed out the inconsistencies in Steven Freeman's stories during police interrogations and court hearings, highlighting the contradictions in his accounts. Mary Catherine Higdon provided an emotional testimony about the alleged abuse she suffered at the hands of Steven Freeman. However, before handing the case over to the jury, Kate Lenhard urged them to consider the possibility that Mary Higdon was not acting in self-defense, but rather was a mastermind of manipulation. The prosecution presented additional evidence and counter-arguments despite the lost confession recording. A forensic examination showed that Steven Freeman was sitting on the bed at the time of the shooting, making it impossible for him to have been attacking Mary Higdon. Furthermore, while Mary claimed that the gun was always kept unloaded, detectives suspected that the pistol was actually loaded on the evening of August 1, 2018, when Mary was preparing a rope for Steven. Here's a clearer explanation. The presence of grease marks on the slide and inside the pistol led investigators to suspect that Mary Catherine might have loaded the pistol beforehand. However, those who knew Steven Freeman, including colleagues, neighbors, family friends, and acquaintances, consistently described him as non-aggressive. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine changed her story at least 10 times during the investigation, which prosecutors attributed to fear. Mary Catherine rejected a plea deal because she was facing a potential death sentence. As the jury deliberated, they heard from all the witnesses and the accused. After just 10 minutes, the jury was ready to deliver their verdict, but 2 jurors had lingering doubts about the prosecution's case. These jurors felt that the investigators, in their eagerness to charge Mary Catherine with premeditated murder, had overlooked crucial facts. They were particularly concerned that the prosecution had failed to thoroughly investigate Steven Freeman's phone, including his text messages and browsing history. Ultimately, the only significant evidence against Mary Catherine was her own lies, which weren't enough to prove her guilt. The jurors' arguments, particularly those of Victor and Chris, had a significant impact. After deliberating, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of not guilty, freeing Mary Catherine Higdon after a lengthy process. The 12 jurors reached the following conclusions. They found the defendant not guilty on the first charge of malicious action and the second charge of serious action. The judge subsequently acquitted Mary Catherine Higdon of all charges, including intentional action, reckless action, assault with a deadly weapon, and carrying a weapon during the commission of a crime. The verdict shocked many in the courtroom, including Jennifer Freeman, who struggled to contain her anger towards the jurors. Those supporting Steven's family were also stunned by the outcome. Following her acquittal, Mary Catherine returned home to Griffin to be with her family. Since then, she has maintained a low profile, avoiding social media to evade unwanted media and public attention. Mary Catherine's Instagram profile is private, and there is no information available about her current location. It is believed that she has moved on from her difficult past and is now living a quiet, private life. Steven Freeman's mother paid tribute to her son on social media, remembering him as a kind and loving person. He lived a life full of love, joy, and friendship, and everyone who knew him considered him a friend. He especially cherished the relationships he made while hunting and fishing. Steven had a special way of showing love and care to those around him. He made people feel seen and heard, often making them laugh until they cried. He was always smiling, hugging, and staying close to those he cared about. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lyanna Friedenbach. Lyanna Friedenbach and Felipe Cafe, the young people involved in this tragedy, came from different backgrounds. Lyanna, born in May 1987 in São Paulo, was the elder of 2 children in a wealthy and respected family. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a well-known figure in the city. Felipe Silva Café, also from São Paulo, was born in July 1984, but grew up in a large, modest family. From a young age, he worked part-time to support himself and help his family. They met at school and developed a strong friendship that blossomed into romance. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. Lyanna's parents, who were strict and religious, had brought her up to attend Sunday school and church regularly and were opposed to her dating at such a young age. Social inequality also contributed significantly to the situation, as she came from a wealthy family while her partner was from a poor background. However, the parents' prohibitions did not deter the young lovers from staying together. Instead, they started secretly dating in various locations where they would not be seen, just to spend some time together. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to take a trip to a secluded area to be alone for a while. They carefully planned the trip, which was meant to be an exciting adventure for them. They came up with a believable alibi to justify their absence and avoid arousing suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Lyanna, on the other hand, told her parents that she was going on a sightseeing trip with some guys from church, knowing that they would not question her further. The Friedenbach and Café families believed the fabricated stories and let their children go without any concerns. Lyanna and Felipe were overjoyed that they could spend a whole week together, free from their parents' scrutiny and judgment. The young couple decided to visit the picturesque province of Iguaçu. They packed lightly, bringing a tent, sleeping bags, some personal items, and a small supply of food. However, they faced a significant challenge. They had hardly any money. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they planned their route in advance to reach their destination by bus. On the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed meeting point, careful not to be seen by anyone who knew them. They caught the first bus and, after arriving in another city in the evening, spent the night at the bus station. 2 more bus rides took them to their desired location. From there, they had to walk a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the woods where they planned to camp and spend a few days alone together. Despite their fatigue after the long journey, the warm and sunny day put them in high spirits, and they joked, laughed, and made plans for their mini vacation. Once they reached the spot marked on their map, they began setting up their modest but cozy camp. Lyanna and Felipe's plans were ruined by unwelcome visitors. When they traveled to a remote and secluded area, they didn't consider that poverty and crime often thrive in such places. Their arrival didn't go unnoticed, especially since they were well-dressed and carrying large backpacks and bags as they walked through the forest to the abandoned farm where they planned to stay. They caught the attention of local bandits, Paulo Cesar de Silva Marquez, nicknamed Perron Bucu, and Roberto Alves Cardoso, known as Chino, who was only 16 but already led the gang. The bandits were interested in the strangers, particularly the beautiful young girl. They decided that the backpacks likely contained valuables and could be robbed. The bandits secretly followed the couple and watched from the underbrush. Lyanna and Felipe set up their tent, had a snack, and began to clean up their campsite. The bandits waited in ambush until they were certain no one else would join the couple and that they didn't have any weapons. Perron Bucu and Chino then attacked Lyanna and Felipe, threatening them, and Felipe, frightened, didn't even try to run away or fight back against the unknown attackers. Having thoroughly searched all the bags and backpacks, the criminals found nothing of value. They then decided to demand a ransom from the boys' and girls' relatives. Lyanna, terrified, quickly revealed that she came from a wealthy family and her father would pay them any amount they demanded. The criminals were thrilled with this development, but lacking experience in such cases, they were unsure how to proceed to get the money and release the prisoners. As they refined their plan, The bandits tried to determine the value of their captives and the ransom they could demand. To prevent escape, they decided to hide the prisoners. Initially, they were taken to a rundown structure near the farm where they were staying, but it lacked windows and doors. Later, they were moved to the home of one of the gang members. There, Felipe was tied up and brutally beaten to prevent escape and resistance. That night, the gang members took turns abusing the bound and helpless Lyanna, ultimately breaking her spirit. The kidnappers were unable to figure out how to demand and collect a ransom, so they decided to kill the captives and hide their bodies in the woods, making it unlikely they would ever be found. After torturing the kidnappers took them to a remote area in the woods the following day. Pernambuco took the badly beaten Felipe deep into the forest, where a gunshot was heard, and then he returned alone. Lyanna realized what had happened and that her loved one was dead. Although the kidnappers tried to convince Lyanna that they had released Felipe, they had other sinister plans in mind for her. They intended to keep her captive as their plaything until they grew tired of her, especially since no one had begun searching for the missing boys at that time. A couple of days after Lyanna left, her parents discovered that there was no church excursion trip, and her friends were unaware of her whereabouts. The Friedenbach family suspected that Lyanna had run off with her boyfriend, Felipe, and immediately contacted his parents. However, Felipe's family believed he had gone camping with friends, so they couldn't assist in locating the couple. The situation was complicated by the fact that neither Lyanna nor Felipe had been in contact for several days, and their phones were turned off. Thanks to the Friedenbach family's connections and resources, they were able to mobilize the entire city's police force to track the couple's trail, step by step. Through trickery, they managed to reconstruct the route the young people took after running away from home. The police arrived at Embu-Guasu, where the last bus had dropped them off, and from there they had to navigate through a deserted wooded area on foot. This was also the last location where their phones were still online. A massive search operation was launched, involving police officers, rescuers, and concerned citizens who had learned about the incident and wanted to help. A local businessman even offered his personal helicopter to aid in the search effort and distributed flyers with photos of the missing pair. The search party quickly found the couple's camp, but what they saw was chilling. Although there were no signs of bloodshed or struggle, it was clear that something horrific had taken place. The contents of their bags had been emptied and scattered about. Their tent had been sliced open from top to bottom with a knife, and the guys' phones were lying nearby. As the rescuers combed through the area, they soon stumbled upon Philippe's lifeless body. The young man had been shot in the back of the head at close range, and it was clear that he had never stood a chance. Although the chances of finding Lyanna alive were now extremely low, the searchers held on to hope, however slim. Henry Friedenbach actively sought the help of the press to widely publicize the search for Lyanna, ensuring that as many people as possible were aware of the situation. A substantial reward was offered for any information about her whereabouts, although unfortunately, this did not lead to a breakthrough in the case. Once the criminals had disposed of Felipe, they returned Lyanna to the same house where they had previously held both her and Felipe captive. By this time, the group of criminals had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gano da Silva and Agnaldo Pius Chino. Agnaldo, in particular, callously declared that Lyanna was now his property and that he had the freedom to do with her as he pleased. He then shockingly invited the others to indulge in their darkest desires with Lyanna, an invitation that was quickly accepted by the group. A day after the large-scale search operation began, the criminals relocated with their captive Lyanna to the house of Anthony Matias de Barros, another gang member. That evening, they took Lyanna with them when they went fishing. The ringleader showed a pretense of concern by putting his jacket over her due to the chilly weather. Later that evening, Chino's older brother, who was unaware of his siblings' illegal activities, arrived at the same location. Chino introduced Lyanna to his brother as his girlfriend, but the brother immediately recognized her as the girl the police were searching for. The brother took Chino aside and warned him that the police were closing in on them. Chino saw this as a warning and decided it was time to eliminate Lyanna and flee. He deceived Lyanna by telling her she was free to go and he would escort her to the road. However, he actually led her into the forest where he brutally stabbed her to death with a knife and then crushed her skull with a rock to ensure she was dead. Lyanna's body was discovered 5 days after the massacre, with no signs of life and severe mutilation. The key piece of evidence was the killer's jacket, which Lyanna was wearing. The perpetrators were not only cruel, cynical, and ruthless, but also incredibly stupid and short-sighted. Despite their brutality, they did not attempt to flee, hide, or destroy the physical evidence, believing they would never be caught. This overconfidence ultimately led to their quick identification and apprehension by the police. The ringleader, Chino, made a crucial mistake by leaving his jacket on Lyanna's body, which retained his sweat marks. He then took the murder weapon to his house, washing it and hiding it in the yard. He also tried to wash his blood-stained clothes so he could continue wearing them. However, DNA analysis ultimately linked the gang members to the crime, allowing the police to apprehend them almost simultaneously. The ringleader did not deny his involvement in the crime and instead chose to testify, bragging about kidnapping, abusing, and ultimately killing the victim, Lyanna. He provided a detailed account of her final days. Following a lengthy trial, most adult members of the criminal gang received severe sentences. However, the ringleader, Chino, was only 16 at the time of the crimes, so he was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a relatively lenient regime. During his incarceration, Chino made multiple escape attempts and exhibited aggressive and inappropriate behavior, which led to a psychiatric evaluation. The examination revealed several mental abnormalities, which cumulatively turned him into a calculating sadist and murderer devoid of pity or remorse. Chino, responsible for the murder of young men, was sent to a secure medical facility for mandatory treatment and rehabilitation despite the family's numerous appeals. His living conditions are now comfortable, with a private room featuring a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He receives 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, and his monthly maintenance costs around approximately $2,500. In recent years, Chino has repeatedly requested his release, arguing that he has completed his treatment and no longer poses a threat to anyone, allowing him to resume his normal life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana Dell. Diana Dell was born in 1959 in a quiet suburb city of Los Angeles called Tustin. Her dad was in the military and her mom worked at a small clothing factory. When Diana was 19, she met a guy named Kevin Green. She was at a bar with her friend when some men started bothering them. He was being too pushy, so Kevin decided to step in. After he made the guy go away, Diana offered to buy him a drink to say thanks. A few days later, they went on a date, and things moved pretty fast from there. At the time, Kevin was already married, but he and his wife were in the process of getting divorced. Meanwhile, he and Diana moved in together, and she got pregnant. As soon as Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married the same day, eagerly awaiting the birth of their daughter. They rented an apartment in a small complex in Tustin. Kevin served in the Marines, working as a helicopter mechanic at the nearby base. Diana used to work with her mom at the clothing factory, but as her pregnancy progressed, she chose to stay at home and prepare for the arrival of their daughter. By the end of September 1979, Diana was 9.5 months pregnant and due to go to the hospital any day now. On the evening of September 30th, after watching a movie together, Diana and her husband got into an argument. The stress of impending parenthood had been weighing on both of them, so they'd been fighting quite a bit lately. Kevin decided to take a drive to a nearby fast food joint to clear his head and also avoid making the whole situation even worse. About 40 minutes later, a local police department received a chilling call. It was Kevin, and he said that someone had shot his wife and she needed an ambulance as soon as possible. A patrol car was nearby, and officers quickly arrived at the scene. On entering the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed in her bedroom, covered in blood, seemingly from a head wound resembling a gunshot. The bedroom wall was also splattered with blood. Diana showed signs of life, trying to breathe, so the officers started performing first aid while they waited for the ambulance. They also asked Kevin to leave the room as they were still unsure of what had happened. The medics soon arrived and carefully moved Diana into the ambulance. At first, they also thought she had a gunshot wound, but they quickly realized it wasn't the case. The wound appeared to be caused by blunt force trauma. Kevin wanted to go with his wife, but the police didn't allow him to. They needed to take his statement, and at that moment, they were considering all possible scenarios, including his involvement in the attack. Kevin was clearly in shock and seemed to struggle to comprehend the officers' words. He even attempted to get into the ambulance, so they had to stop him as it drove away. He began to regain his composure and finally told the police what had happened that night. Kevin explained that he and his wife had an argument, so he decided to go to a fast food joint to get burgers and clear his head. When he left the apartment, he realized he had left his keys inside, but he chose not to go back for them. He simply shut the door and headed to his car. Kevin also mentioned that not far from their apartment complex, he saw a van with its back door open, and there was an African-American man walking back and forth to it. Given that it was around 2 a.m., Kevin found it a bit unusual. He drove to his favorite fast food place, but there was a long line, so he went to another one of the same chain a few miles away. He bought some burgers and headed home, which took about 40 minutes. When he got to the front door, Kevin found it wide open. He rushed inside and heard strange sounds like someone snoring. Upon entering the bedroom, he saw Diana covered in blood, struggling to breathe, and immediately called the police. Some parts of Kevin's story immediately raised questions for the officers. For example, his decision to go for burgers in the middle of the night seemed odd, and the whole trip also took him about 40 minutes, which was quite long considering that all the restaurants were close to his home. Nevertheless, officers inspected the fast food bag, and the food was still warm. The receipt contained the restaurant's address and the time of purchase, corroborating his account. Based on this, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but first, they had asked him to provide a blood sample. DNA analysis wasn't available at the time, but experts could compare the blood traces found at the crime scene with Kevin's blood type. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the wound on her head was not from a gunshot. Most likely, the assailant used a small but heavy object, like a piece of wood, and inflicted a series of blows. At the hospital, Diana slipped into a coma, and doctors worked tirelessly for several hours to save both the woman and her unborn child. They eventually managed to stabilize Diana's condition, but she still needed surgery. Meanwhile, investigators asked medical experts to determine if Diana had been sexually assaulted. Diana's position when found made officers consider this possibility. The experts later confirmed this, finding semen traces on her body. However, there were complications. Kevin had told detectives they were intimate a few hours before the argument, but DNA analysis was unavailable then. So despite having a biological sample from the perpetrator, little could be accomplished. Kevin and Diana's relatives spent the entire night at the hospital, hoping Diana and her baby could survive the attack. However, by morning, something unexpected happened. One of the monitors detected a sharp deterioration in the baby's condition, and despite the extensive efforts of the doctors, the baby didn't survive. As for Diana, medics performed surgery immediately after the baby's death, and her condition was stabilized. She remained in a coma, but her chances of survival were now considered high. However, doctors didn't expect her to return to a normal life after such serious trauma. Detectives worked tirelessly to track down the perpetrator who attacked Diana. After her baby passed away, The case was classified as a homicide, and the local police department put all their resources into it. Despite Kevin providing an alibi, detectives didn't rush to rule him out as a suspect. His story raised numerous questions due to his argument with his wife, leaving the front door unlocked, and being absent for an extended period for a supposed quick trip to the fast food joint. His claim of seeing a suspicious man near the house in the middle of the night also seemed too convenient, but there was no evidence against Kevin. The police already had another suspect when crimes with a similar modus operandi had started happening in Tustin and its surrounding areas about a year before. In December 1978, an unknown perpetrator broke into the apartment of a 17-year-old girl, struck her with a piece of wood, and sexually assaulted her, resulting in her death. 4 months later, the same happened to a 21-year-old woman. Someone broke into her home, struck her with a piece of wood, and she didn't survive either. In July 1979, the unknown perpetrator entered another woman's apartment and did the same, but she managed to survive. However, the victim spent several weeks in a coma due to her injuries, and her subsequent testimony didn't lead detectives to finding the attacker. In September 1979, less than a month before Diana's attack, the same happened to a 31-year-old woman who died the next day. Her son provided investigators with a description of the assailant, but the man still couldn't be identified. All these crimes had important similarities, similar to the attack on Diana. Police were almost sure that they were dealing with a serial killer, and they were putting all their effort into catching this person. He had already been given a nickname, the Bedroom Basher, as the criminal was committing his crimes with short breaks and was active in a relatively small suburban area of Los Angeles. Detectives thought he might strike again soon, so they decided to use the media to warn all women who lived alone, especially those in lower-floor apartments, as they seemed to be the preferred targets of the suspected serial killer. This caused widespread panic. Women started buying any form of protection they could find, enrolling in self-defense classes, and staying with friends and family in an effort to protect themselves from the dangerous criminal. Police also started patrolling the streets at night. Detectives interviewed anyone who could have had any connection to these crimes, and soon they received their first leads. Several neighbors of the victims reported seeing a suspicious white man with dark, thick hair near their houses. Although this description was quite superficial, police located several matching men and investigated them, but it led nowhere. But there was a serious problem. Diana couldn't speak or remember anything, and according to the doctors, her brain needed some time to recover, functioning at the level of a 6-year-old child. Around the same time, another attack happened in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, struck her several times with a piece of wood, and sexually assaulted her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police once again failed to catch the culprit. Diana spent several more days in the hospital, and her mind began to gradually return to normal. However, she had almost completely lost her memory and still couldn't recall even her parents. Doctors said her memory might eventually return, but warned her family not to recount anything to her and to allow her to remember everything on her own. Once her life-threatening condition passed, Diana was discharged from the hospital, and her family took her home. Since Kevin needed to work on the military base to pay the bills, they moved in with Diana's parents, who could care for her around the clock. 2 weeks later, another tragic attack occurred in the city with a similar modus operandi, and this time, the unknown assailant killed a 17-year-old girl. After being discharged from the hospital, Diana started attending physiotherapy, and her condition gradually improved. She still couldn't speak or remember what happened to her, but everything suddenly changed 6 weeks after the attack. During a physiotherapy session, the therapist brought up the attack and asked if Diana still couldn't remember who did it to her. To the doctor's surprise, Diana suddenly nodded and pointed to her wedding ring. When Diana's mother came to pick her up, the doctor told her about this, and the mother asked her daughter, "Was it Kevin who attacked you?" and Diana nodded. Right after that, her mother took her to the police station where she spoke with the lead detective. He asked Diana a few more questions, and she confirmed that she suddenly remembered the moment of the attack, and the perpetrator was none other than her husband. The detective's perception of the case took a sharp turn. Initially, he and his team were convinced that Diana fell victim to the notorious serial offender behind the other assaults. However, new uncertainties arose. Was Kevin the bedroom basher? Residing in the vicinity of the incidents and fitting the description given by multiple witnesses, a white man with dark hair raised suspicions. Alternatively, did Kevin plot to eliminate his wife by masquerading as the elusive assailant? Given the striking similarities in the bedroom basher's modus operandi in each instance, such a scheme wouldn't have been challenging. Investigators put Kevin under surveillance to closely monitor his movements in the hopes of linking him to other attacks. Police spoke with Kevin's friends to gather more information about him. They discovered that Kevin's relationship with Diana was strained, characterized by frequent arguments. This was further confirmed by neighbors who often heard them yelling. Kevin's friends mentioned that he complained to them about Diana's reluctance to be intimate during the final months of her pregnancy. However, when speaking to detectives, Kevin portrayed his relationship with Diana as nearly flawless. Besides that, detectives couldn't gather any additional useful information. Kevin behaved quite normally. He went to work and came back home without lingering anywhere else, and didn't raise any suspicions. The police received results from the lab showing an discovery. Along with the attacker's semen, they found skin particles with blood under Diana's nails. Specialists matched the attacker's blood type to Kevin's blood sample, confirming they were the same. This indicated that Kevin shared the same blood type as the person who attacked Diana. Based on this evidence, detectives formulated the most probable scenario of what occurred on that significant night. Kevin had indeed purchased burgers at a fast food establishment a few miles away from his home. The time on the receipt and the cashier's testimony verified his presence there. Consequently, the detective suspected that he might have assaulted Diana before leaving home, swiftly visited the fast food place to establish an alibi, thus explaining the prolonged 40-minute absence. Regarding motive, detectives theorized that Diana's refusal to engage in intimacy served as the trigger for Kevin's violent actions. Despite Kevin's claim that they had sex hours before the incident, he frequently complained to friends about Diana's reluctance for months. Given the severity of the attack, detectives believe this was Kevin's breaking point. The police re-interviewed Diana, who confirmed she vividly remembered the attack and that Kevin was the one who assaulted her. During the conversation, her mother said they could no longer pretend and live under the same roof as Kevin after that. Detectives decided to arrest him and proceed with legal action. Kevin was arrested at a store to protect Diana's family and to avoid arresting him at their home. He denied the accusations, claiming his innocence. The court preparation lasted 10 months, during which Diana's health improved, allowing her to speak again, though with some difficulty. Multiple doctors confirmed her recovery and deemed her a credible witness. Diana testified in court, confirming that the person who attacked her that night was indeed her husband. Kevin's defense insisted on his innocence, trying to use the fast food alibi, but it wasn't enough against the victim's testimony. In November 1980, Kevin was found guilty of killing his child and assaulting his wife. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Regarding Kevin's possible involvement in other murders and assaults, detectives noticed something interesting before his arrest. 2 more similar crimes occurred in their county, but both victims survived, and the attacker's identity remained unknown. However, after Kevin's arrest, the attacks suddenly stopped. Before that, the bedroom basher committed his crimes quite frequently, sometimes with only a few weeks between them. But once Kevin was arrested, there were no more similar crimes. After the sentencing, Diana filed for divorce, and Kevin didn't try to object. Diana continued to work on her recovery, but it was quite challenging considering the injuries she sustained. Her brain almost returned to normal, but some problems remained with her forever. She partially lost her hearing and vision and still struggled to speak. As for Kevin, he continued to insist on his innocence for years. His time in prison wasn't easy, as other inmates repeatedly attacked him for killing a child, and he ended up in the hospital multiple times. When he had the opportunity to apply for parole, the commission denied it, and over the following years, he received 3 more denials. The main reason for these decisions was that Kevin had never admitted his guilt, which was seen as a lack of remorse. Now, detectives had the opportunity not only to determine if one person was behind all these crimes, but also possibly to identify them. Kevin remained the prime suspect, but when experts obtained the DNA profile of the perpetrator and added it to the database, there was an unexpected twist. All these samples matched another man named Gerald Parker. Parker was arrested in the same year as Kevin. He assaulted a 13-year-old girl in Tustin and was caught shortly after. At the time, detectives did not link this crime to the series of attacks because they had a different pattern. While the bedroom basher targeted victims late at night in their apartments, Parker abducted the girl on the street. Since then, Parker has been serving his sentence in prison and was set to be released in just a few days. After investigators obtained DNA matches for Parker in all the unsolved cases, they also remembered the attack on Diana, although this crime was considered solved. Detectives still considered its connection to the other similar cases highly likely. Now they understood that Kevin definitely wasn't the serial killer, leaving them with just one question: did he really attack his wife? During those years, Parker served at the same military base as Kevin and also owned a dark-colored van. As we recall, on the very first day, Kevin told the police that he saw an African-American man in front of their house walking near a dark van. This made detectives wonder, what if Parker was behind the attack on Diana? The local prosecutor visited Kevin in prison and informed him of the progress in the investigation of the Bedroom Basher murder series. He then asked Kevin to provide a direct sample of his DNA for analysis. Kevin, who had been trying to do this for years, immediately agreed. While experts conducted the analysis, detectives went to see Parker in prison. At that point, they hadn't yet charged him with the series of attacks because they needed time to prepare such a complex case. Nevertheless, the police decided to talk to the suspect, hoping he might give them a confession. Parker began to deny his involvement in the series of crimes, so detectives shifted the conversation to the attack on Diana. Before questioning him, they reviewed Parker's case and found something interesting. After his arrest for assaulting the girl, he told the police that military service was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Detectives decided to use this to their advantage and questioned how he could let another soldier take the blame for his crime. They continued pressing Parker, appealing to his loyalty to the military, until he suddenly said that another person was indeed serving time for the murder he committed. He continued admitting that on that night, he did indeed drive to Kevin's house in his van. His plan was to roam the neighborhood, peering into ground floor windows as he had done many times before, looking for his next victim. But this time he heard screams from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and a man came out onto the street. Parker noticed that he didn't lock the door, waited for a few minutes, then entered the apartment and assaulted Diana. He also said that he didn't know her husband since they had different duties on the military base. Parker also confessed to the other crimes, admitting to 6 murders and 3 non-lethal attacks. After the police obtained his confessions, DNA results proved Parker's involvement and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor promised to overturn his sentence as soon as possible, and a few days later, Kevin walked free after spending 16 years behind bars. The twist in this case caused a widespread outcry. It wasn't just because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison for someone else's crime, but also because it took so long for the police to establish the real killer's identity. However, that wasn't the last twist in this case. When Kevin was released, the state of California agreed to pay him $10,000, which was a relatively small amount of money even for those times. Several years later, he got additional compensation of $100 for each day spent in prison, totaling $620,000. But the story didn't end there. Despite Kevin's full exoneration, Diana refused to believe in his innocence. Up until that point, she had claimed Kevin was the only one who attacked her. After biological data from her body matched Parker's DNA, Diana came up with a new version of the stories. She claimed that on the night in question, Kevin attacked and assaulted her before leaving, and then Parker entered the apartment and did the same to her. Parker himself repeatedly stated that when he entered the apartment, the woman was simply lying on the bed without any visible injuries or signs of distress. He also claimed that he was the one who struck her on the head. Diana's family proposed another theory, suggesting that Kevin might have asked Parker to commit the crime, which is why he left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker continued to insist that he didn't know Kevin. There were numerous people on the military base, many of whom didn't know each other personally. Besides, such a version would imply that Kevin should have known Parker was the serial killer to ask him something like that, which he vehemently denied. Kevin also denied any connection with Parker, insisting he would never harm Diana, let alone their unborn daughter. He maintained that he left the door unlocked simply because he didn't want to return for the keys right after the argument with his wife. He also added that he still blames himself for that decision. Diana insists on her version of events to this day, and there could be a simple explanation for that. The trauma she endured as a result of the attack had a profound impact on her brain. When she emerged from the coma, doctors warned all her relatives not to tell her what had happened, as her brain could accept any information as true, and she would believe such memories to be accurate and real. It's worth noting that even at the time of Kevin's release, 16 years after the incident, she continued to experience serious difficulties, such as struggling to process fast speech, indicating that the consequences of the trauma had an irreparable impact on her brain. It cannot be ruled out that the trauma is the primary reason for her conviction of Kevin's involvement. As for Parker, in 1999 he was sentenced to death, but this sentence has never been carried out. After many years of waiting in prison, California imposed a moratorium on executions, so Parker continues to serve his sentence behind bars to this day.